Welcome everybody to the full council meeting, including members, officers and any members of the public who may be attending remotely. Please be advised that the meeting will be live streamed and data collected during the recording of the meeting will be retained in accordance with the council's data retention policy. The record of the meeting may be added, recording of the meeting may be added to the council's website. The following staff are in attendance: the Chief Executive, the monitoring officer in a second.
He was there.
He was there. And Democratic Services. Agenda item 1 is the emergency evacuation procedure. There is no scheduled test of the fire alarm, and if the alarm does sound, please leave the building quickly using the doors signed as fire escapes. You know where they are by now, hopefully, although I think we've got a new member here, so that one's the closest one for you generally. The other one's opposite the lifts. Do not use the lifts. You'll then assemble at the front or back, whatever you want to call it, of the car park. Do what Larissa says at that point. Is there anyone in attendance that might require assistance if we have to evacuate? Excellent. All right, in that case, we can move on to agenda item 2, which is apologies for absence. I'll invite the Chief Exec to give apologies, and I assume there's going to be a few that have come in late, given KCC are still in their scrutiny committee. It has now finished.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have received apologies from Councillors Golding, Carrie Pollard, Ashley Shield, Roger Clark. Ashley Shield and Carrie Pollard are online but will not be able to vote. In addition, we are aware that Councillors Lehman, Jays, Booth, Whiting and Worcester are currently or have been stuck in the meeting at KCC, so we don't know whether they will be in attendance late or whether they will give their apologies following that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any others, members? I'm assuming Councillor Whiting would be on that list as well. Yep, excellent. Yep.
We've had a note from Councillor Booth asking if we can give his apologies. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Apparently he hasn't. If you don't turn up, he has. If he does turn up, he hasn't.
Yep, that sounds about right. We'll go to item 3, which is the minutes. Do members approve the minutes of the full council held on the 4th of December 2024, minute numbers 451 to 467, as a correct record? Excellent. Item 4 is the declarations of interest. Do members have any interests to declare? Excellent. We'll go on to Mayor's announcements, and I will start by saying I'm sure you'll all join me in wishing Billy well. I understand that he was taken ill following the Mayor's briefing yesterday. I'm not suggesting that the leaders gave him a hard time, but maybe we did. But hopefully he makes a good recovery and is back soon. We are, of course, have the pleasure of Kelly in that absence. So since we last met, it's been a relatively quiet period, but Christmas, New Year, I have attended events both in and out of the borough. I think I've been with the Gurkhas more times than not in that period, which is always a delight for me, and I'm sure a delight for anybody else. And particularly last night was the Mayor of Maidstone's usual fundraiser at the Gurkha Kitchen, which I know all too well, given that it's right next to one of the blocks that my work has. So, yeah, knew the venue straight off the bat. Also attending Sheppey Rugby Club's girls' rugby match and their Christmas party, which was quite joyous. If anyone sees any videos of me singing, please do not watch them. They are absolutely awful. Exactly that. And the I will say that that we've also had the step down of the Sheppey Carnival Court as well in that period. And I do wish the girls well that have done that. It has been a privilege to see how they've developed over the year in terms of their confidence levels. Welcome, Councillor Lehman. Yeah, so we've done that one, we've done that one. We do have a number of events coming into the calendar. Anybody who was hoping to attend my quiz night and hasn't booked a table, I'm really sorry, but it is fully booked now and sold out. So sorry about that, guys. We might have to put another one on at a later date. I will also welcome new councillor Kieran Mushuk. Am I about right? Correct me when I'm wrong, that's fine. And I hope you're all enjoying your new seats. It's just sort of how we managed to squeeze everybody in with all the changes that have been going on with by-elections and whatnot over the last few months. With that, given we've got such a jam-packed agenda, I will call it a day and hand over to members submitted by the public. There are no members of the public that have submitted questions. Oh, questions, yes. Questions, not members submitted by the public, yeah. It's been one of those long days. So, members' questions. We've got 4 questions from members. I will ask each member their question in turn and invite the chair of the relevant service committee to respond. Then I will ask if they have a supplementary question. Our first question, I'm going to just give him a chance to arrive, so I'm going to take it in a different order. So I'll move to Councillor Baldock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A little quicker than expected. My question is to the leader. Does the leader agree that the decision on the Highstead Valley planning application 21503914 EI out was unreasonably delayed by this council?
Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your question, Councillor Baldock. No, I do not believe that the decision on the Highstead application was unreasonably delayed by this council. As chair of the planning committee, I'm sure that you'll be well aware that at the point at which Swelborough Council was set to make its decision, despite several months of effort to secure the required information from the potential developer, the application still required additional information to be submitted, such that legal advice confirmed our view that it could not lawfully have been approved. Applications of all skills must be appropriately assessed against national and local policies, and evidence needs to be provided to allow those assessments to be consistent and robust. In the case of a planning application of this magnitude, the quantity of evidence to assess, of course, is vast. Likewise, applications need appropriate and commensurate consultation with the public and stakeholders. For the Highstead application, this meant considerable time dedicated to engagement and review of representations received. Throughout the process, officers maintained dialogue with the applicant's representatives, and I'm confident a due process was followed as expediently as possible.
Councillor Baldock, do you have a supplementary?
I do, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank the leader for his response, and I fully agree with his comments and his summary of the situation. I think the officers have done a really good job on this. As the statement regarding the Highstead application being unreasonably delayed is a direct quote from Kevin McKenna, Labour MP for Sittingbourne and Sheppey, in his request to the Secretary of State to call the application in, will he now agree to write on behalf of this council to Kevin McKenna, Labour MP for Sittingbourne and Sheppey, outlining the reasons that his comments were so wrong?
Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, and thank you for the supplementary question, Councillor Baldock. I think the term that was used by the MP, Kevin McKenna, was that it may have been unreasonably delayed. In terms of writing to him, I really don't understand what that's going to gain us. We've said this in a public meeting here. What I've written is a matter of public record, and so I intend to do nothing further. Thank you.
So, point of order, if I may, Mr. Mayor. Right, just for clarification on that, and I'm looking to Robin on this from our experience as well. The decision at the last council meeting was chosen by this council and therefore is binding for 6 months. So that request actually wouldn't have been able to be actioned anyway under the Constitution. Am I correct in that, Robin?
Writing the letter, as I take your point, but given the leader's answer, I don't think there's really any need to.
Point of order. I wouldn't ask for something that was unreasonable, be honest. New information had come to light since that meeting. We didn't know what was in the content of the letter, so it would have been a response to the letter and not to the alleged comments in the press release, which the previous motion was about.
Right. Question 3 is going to come from Councillor Perkin.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. This is a question for the Chair of the Community and Leisure Committee, Councillor Palmer. Following multiple consecutive years of parking charge increases, combined with issues of large puddles, potholes and lines which are difficult to see, residents have become increasingly frustrated. There have been increasing incidents of cars going the wrong way around the car park due to the arrow pointers being completely worn. Could the Chair of the Community Committee confirm when car parks will be resurfaced and lines be repainted, particularly at Faversham Central Car Park, the busiest car park in the borough, and at Queen's Hall Car Park? Thank you.
Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Income from the planned display parking is used to offset the cost of council services across the council. Whilst our parking charges have risen, so have our costs, such as the cost of materials, electricity and labour. An annual budget is provided for car parks maintenance and management. Our officers inspect each car park regularly and prioritise health and safety work from this budget. We can also utilise income from penalty charge notices to improve the car parks, and this is often used for large renovations, such as those recently done on Ship on Shore car park in Sheerness. We will be formulating a programme of works for 25-26 financial year in due course, and we'll reassess the car parks as the above car parks. Thank you.
Councillor Perkin, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you for your response. Does the Chair agree that last year the Community Committee Parking Working Group put forward an equitable policy which was then altered at the last minute, and at the next budget we should look to rectify that situation?
Councillor Palmer.
Yep, thank you. Yes, I do recall. Yes, you're quite correct, and I think at the next budget it's down to the members to make the decision at the time of the budget. Thank you.
Question 4, Councillor Perkin.
Thank you. Just a question to the Leader. With the Government White Paper on devolution and the apparent keenness of the administration at KCC and Medway to undertake an accelerated path to local government reorganisation, many residents in Faversham have been in contact with councillors about the possible make-up of the proposed new unitary authorities. One of the key concerns that has been highlighted is the possibility of a significant disconnect between local health services and the new unitaries, especially given that Faversham sits in a different PCN, meaning residents access healthcare to the east of the county. Will the Leader ensure that this concern is highlighted in discussions about possible new unitary council boundaries?
Councillor Tim Gibson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Perkin, for that question. We are at the early stages of discussions with the Kent Authority partners about any local government reorganisation proposal and what it would look like, and I can share that there isn't a common position across Kent. I understand that health structures are important, and I certainly have been considering the impact on health of any proposed unitarisation. My main priority is that any local government reorganisation proposal is the best that it can be for the whole of Swirl. Ensuring our councillor and resident voices heard is paramount to the work we need to do over the coming months. I've set up a working group for group leaders to ensure that we can ensure that all voices across the political spectrum are heard, and any proposal coming from Swirl is co-produced and has our residents' best interests at its heart.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Councillor Perkin, any supplementary? And I don't think Councillor Whiting's made it back from KCC yet. No. So he will receive a written response to his question. Right, agenda item 8 is the Leader's Statement. I'll point this out now so that everyone is aware. I am fully aware that we now have so many group leaders that have the right to respond, that if we stick to the 30 minutes, no member who is not a group leader will get the opportunity to speak if everyone uses their time. I may use my discretion if I feel it is appropriate. So the Leader will read his statement. And then I will ask the leaders of the opposition groups to respond in the usual way. Following that, I will invite other members to respond to the leader's statement. Members invited to speak will have 3 minutes. The item has an overall time limit of 30 minutes, which, as I've said on this occasion, I may use my discretion on. To ensure broad fairness, I will invite responses from members of the administration and opposition in roughly equal number. This may mean that I deviate from the order in which members have indicated they wish to speak. Can I please remind all members that responses must be to issues raised in the statement? Councillor Tim Gibson, if you'd like to give your statement.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and good evening one and all. I'll commence this evening by echoing Mr Mayor's words and offering my congratulations and welcome to Councillor Kieran Mishuk, who was successful in being elected at the recent Milton Regis by-election. Members, can I now beg your indulgence whilst I turn to Mr Mayor and wish him a very happy birthday indeed, and what better way to spend it than chairing a swell full council meeting. As you will all be aware, the Council Coalition administration has ceased, and it would be remiss of me not to thank all of those colleagues who were part of it for the valuable contribution that they all gave to it. And to that end, I'm hoping that going forward, the representation of those that we serve will be framed in an even more inclusive way through a wider participation and collaboration of all groups and members. This is of particular significance as we as a council face interesting times ahead, with emerging issues like devolution and local government reform on the horizon. And one thing that is certain is that this will present a range of challenges for us all. But so often it's the challenges in life that provide the opportunities, and it's important that where there are opportunities, that we seize them when we can. What I will say is that going forward, it is imperative that we have clarity on the government's proposed devolution and reorganisation timelines, in both the short and longer term, to assist in shaping and informing our direction and decision making. I am, of course, anticipating that much of this will be resolved in writing by the government later this week. Or, as I stand here now, I'm told maybe not. Particularly in terms of the decision on whether Kent will be on the devolution priority programme. Furthermore, it would also be helpful for us to have firm assurances amid genuine concerns on some of the proposals, but more specifically around local government reorganisation, which will undoubtedly be an emotive and polarising issue for many members, towns, parishes and residents alike. From a personal perspective, I would want to see decisions being made based on robust data and evidence, and whilst there are diverging views on some of the many questions that are evolving, our collective weight and voice remain our most powerful tool in seeking positive change for our residents and ensuring that proposed reforms will bring benefits for all of our communities across the borough of Swale. That is why I've committed to setting up regular meetings with all group leaders, specifically to provide a collaborative and consensual approach to our aspirations, as we strive to ensure that this council has a foundation to secure the devolution and reorganisation deal that works best for all our local economies and, of course, our residents. Whilst clearly the group leaders will bring forward their respective views, it is equally important that all 47 councillors are afforded the opportunity to feed into that discussion in an informed and inclusive way. Moving on, in the best traditions of the post-festive month that is January, we're subjected to a whole plethora of advertisements on how we may improve our health, ranging from dry January to wonder diets and dance yourself fitter programmes. I therefore thought it appropriate to highlight some of the things that we are doing as a council to address health issues in Swale. And firstly, we're working with Kent County Council to deliver a series of smoke-free public spaces across the borough. The initiative aims to reduce second-hand smoke exposure by restricting smoking in public spaces and educating smokers about the harm caused to both themselves and those around them when they smoke. Ultimately, the goal is to improve public health while supporting and encouraging both smokers and non-smokers to live healthier lives. One of the drivers for the initiative is that in 2023, the number of smokers in the over 18 group in Swale were identified as being higher than the national average, as was the respiratory disease mortality rate within the borough. Part of the ongoing work is to consult on where smoke-free spaces are most needed. For example, play areas, train stations, bus stops, outside libraries, schools, hospitals, etc. The Smoke-Free Area project will also promote KCC's Kent Stop Smoking service, which has supported around 3,000 people in the last year alone to help them quit smoking. Plans to improve access to health and leisure facilities in Sheerness have also been approved by the Council's Planning Committee. The project in Beachfields is a key component of the Council's 20 million Sheerness Revival Programme, which aims to improve the health and well-being, education and leisure facilities on the island and create new employment and training opportunities for local people. GP facilities will be improved and modernised, and the surgery will be relocated to the ground floor to improve access to this important healthcare provision. There will also be leisure facilities within the centre, and Sheppey Matters Health and Wellbeing Charity will have a purpose-built space to help them continue providing their valuable and important services to locals. Finally, elderly, vulnerable and disabled residents can get help to repair, adapt or improve their homes through our Staying Put team. The team provide health and safety checks in the home, identifying any repairs or adaptations that people may need and assisting them in completing grant applications. They address issues that may lead to falls, injuries or even hospitalisation through their fall and hospital admission prevention programme. We worked with over 1,200 people in Swale in the last year to give them advice and practical assistance, helping them regain their independence, confidence and dignity with life-changing adaptations. A number of those, of course, were helped to return home from hospital much more quickly as their discharge was expedited by those adaptations, providing a safe and healthy environment in which they can live. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. I will invite Councillor Baldock to give a response to the statement.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the coalition ended at the end of last year. We found out through a phone call. There was no discussion beforehand. It was just a unilateral decision. And then there was announcements on Facebook that they wanted to broaden the church of Swale. Having lost all their partners, they wanted to broaden the church. So I guess if we want to know what's happening at Swale, watch the Sittingbourne and Sheppey Labour Facebook page, because that's where we find out. When he talks about devolution, this thing that is being imposed upon us at haste, I hope that Kent isn't part of the fast track, because we are not ready. We have had no discussion as Swale about the existential threat that faces this council, what we want to do about it, where we would like to go. I'm being rung by councillors from across Kent asking, what's Swale position? What does Swale want? Where's Swale? Sorry, we don't know. We haven't talked about it. Even though for the last year, this has been a lively issue that we should have been talking about. Well, he didn't mention some of his meetings. He also met with the leader of Medway. And I'm wondering whether the leader of Medway shared with him Medway's plans to engulf Swale in a new unitary called Greater Medway. I don't think that's something we as a council are rushing to embrace. I certainly don't think it's what our residents would like. So has there been any discussion? Is the leader even aware of discussions that Medway are having about a Greater Medway? And if not, why have they not shared with us? Because I think we need to look to other parts of the county for our natural partners. And I have to say, spending money on telling people not to smoke. Every time I see one of them, I grab another fag. Let's talk about, let's stop smoking in pub gardens. Thankfully, that seems to have been pushed on the back burner for a bit, probably to hide other news for a while. I would rather that money that be spent on health could have gone to our pensioners to make up the missing winter fuel allowance. It could have gone to so many other better causes for people who are seeking help with obesity and with many other issues. But no, it's going to stop people smoking where they can't already smoke, on railway stations. Not quite sure where that fits into this programme, but there are better things to spend money on. And I've made that clear. But that's what's decided. And I hope it doesn't cause business any further harm. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock. I'll now invite Councillor Lloyd Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Leader, for this statement, and welcome to Kieran Mushag, round the corner, I think, to his first meeting. Welcome. You are the first member from Reform, and if everything goes according to plan.
Minnie was.
Ah, sorry. I apologise. Moving on. Sorry, I was going to say something but then. The health issue, I'm not a smoker, so I'd take a different position to Councillor Baldock. I welcome the smoke-free zone. Can I just clarify, does that also, and I presume it does, vaping? And it's also to recognise that actually smoking isn't just a health issue potentially for the smokers. It's for those, and I'm thinking for, in particular example, from years gone by, a well-known person, Roy Castle, who did not smoke once in his entire life and sadly died due to lung cancer because of the smoke which he inhaled whilst he was in bars and clubs doing his job as a celebrity and a entertainer. So it's not just to those who actually do smoke. Devolution. Number one topic on the agenda, and it's going to be for, regardless whether we hear anything this week, next week, or whenever it is likely to happen. We've got a job to do, whatever that is, and a plea to everyone in this chamber, regardless of your political colours. The days may be on the wall for this borough council, whenever that is. We still have a job to do. We are still councillors for the people as well. Let's not forget that, whatever happens in the future, and we need to stay motivated and focused on the people as well, whatever happens. And it is going to be difficult, it is going to be challenging, but if we work together, we can achieve it. The leaders' discussions, I've been saying that, as you know, for a very long time, that we should have had more leaders' discussions on lots of subjects. And we have been speaking about devolution for quite some time, because it has been on the agenda. We haven't done very much about it. It's not as if it's just suddenly popped up out of the blue. It's been in the outskirts over there somewhere for quite some time. Yes, it's suddenly taken a pace, and we're going to have to do something about it, but it's not a surprise. And finally, Mr. Mayor, agree, happy birthday. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. Councillor Perkin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to the leader for his report. So, I think it was interesting to lead with devolution and its lack of clarity. I know just this week that Jim McMahon said that local councils weren't going to be expected to reorganise on the 21st of January, and then on the 22nd of January had to say that they were being expected to reorganise. So the clarity and the local government hokey-cokey that the Labour Party is creating at the moment is incredibly frustrating, not just for members but also for staff members, and I hope that there is some clarity by the end of next week, apparently, but I won't hold my breath. I think the leader mentioned the need for robust data and evidence. I completely agree with that, but I also think that we need to be really clear in collecting the qualitative data from our residents about their sense of place, their experiences of service use, their experiences of interacting with all kinds of layers of government, and how they consider themselves to be represented. And we make sure that at all conversations we are taking those voices with us. Smoke-free areas. I am a smug reformed smoker. I, as a Liberal, feel like people should be able to do to their own bodies what they want to do, but I agree that there is definitely some good in protecting people who don't have a choice but to be around other people's decisions. Staying put is absolutely crucial, and I notice every year when we talk about this that the disabled facilities grants remain underspent in most years, and it's really incumbent on all of us as members to make sure that if we have residents that are able to access the disabled facilities grants, that we're pointing people towards being able to do that. I echo the welcome to Councillor Mishuk, who is the first elected Reform member of the Chamber. I hope that you will be able to represent the people of your ward well, and I hope that you also leave a lot of what Mr Farage says at the door. Thank you very much, and happy birthday, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Perkin. Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Mayor. Welcome to the Council Chamber, Councillor Mishuk. I'm sorry that your first full council meeting will be a painfully long one. Be grateful that you didn't come here directly from an 8.5-hour meeting in Maidstone. I'm grateful at least that the meeting in question had a very positive outcome for Swale, in that the Cabinet members' decision to stop their contract with Seashells has been sent back to be debated at their full council meeting in the coming weeks, which is a very good victory. On to devolution and local government reform, reorganisation. Choose whichever letter beginning with R you want to take that third word. The leader said that he would like to see decisions made based on robust data and evidence. I think it would be a good start if we were able to see decisions made at all. The fact that we have come so far down this path without a single meeting with government being available for public viewing, or at the very least having publicly available minutes, is incredibly disappointing. I echo Councillor Perkins' concerns about the risk that local government reorganisation will leave Faversham and its surrounding villages adrift and cause a split between the social and healthcare geographies it's in. This risk appears to have been compounded in recent weeks by advice from the Ministry that new unitary authorities will almost certainly be based on the current district boundaries, with little opportunity for districts to be split, even if the evidence would support doing so for the good of residents. On to smoking. Smoking is a voluntary pollution of the smoker's lungs and does need to be discouraged, but it's easy to focus on the individual factors for health while ignoring the health problems caused by car dependency and inequality. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lehman. I will now open up to members. Please indicate if you wish to speak. I've got Councillor Harrison first, Councillor Jays, Winklis and Nundy. Councillor Harrison.
Sorry, just clocking who managed to get some tea and who didn't. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and yes, happy birthday. I hope it's chocolate, because I do like chocolate cake.
I can confirm that there is chocolate cake in the parlour.
Good. Well, if we can whip through this then. Thank you to the leader for raising a few issues in, we'll say, in my area that come under the Housing and Health Committee. The passive smoking was a project that I agreed to when I was a cabinet member. Very magnanimously, I agreed to this project because I was and still am a smoker. That's my choice. We talked at that time, and I've reiterated it since, school gates and play areas. I used to take my little munchkins down to the sand pit. They were barefoot, because that's what you do in the sand pit. And the cigarette butts, I'm not being funny, it's disgusting. I wouldn't put one out there, but you do get people. So the old enforcement people really need to be on the ball there, because I think it's totally not on. And ditto when the little munchkins are on those slides and swings. You know, they don't have a choice. They're there to play. So it's KCC money. There's a couple of signs, really, but it just shows that we are supportive of it. The other thing which I'm pleased the leader raised was the Stay Put scheme, which was discussed at the last Housing and Health Committee. If you are in hospital, there are 3 pathways. If you can't basically get out under your own steam, you need a bit of help. Pathway 1 is aids and adaptations. Pathway 2 is you need a care package. Pathway 3 is you need a care home. As far as Swale residents are concerned, there is rarely a hold up on Pathway 1 because our staff are really hot on this. The only thing I would say in terms of the underspend on that budget each year, which we did talk about at the committee, is we can only get that work done as quickly as we've got the decent tradespeople to do it. And we did say at the committee meeting that if anyone does know of a good tradesperson, to put their names forward, because the officers can take them through the portal process or whatever else it is to jump through 6 dozen hoops in order to get on the list. And of course, sometimes if I, not that I agree anyway, but if I agreed to your grant on the 28th of February or even the 30th of March, that money ain't going to be spent.
Councillor.
Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Jays.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Excuse my tardiness. I too have come from the Seashells meeting. Regarding the leader's statement, the leader mentioned the devolution working group. Would he be willing to take on an island member onto this working group?
Thank you, Councillor Jays. Councillor Winkles.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I have met with the new councillor, Milton Regis. We have agreed that we can work together on ward issues, and it's for the benefit of Milton Regis. We obviously have difficult political views that doesn't come into representing our ward. We had a meeting the Saturday before last, and I also welcome him to work with me and Milton Regis for the rest of this administration. The other thing is, just briefly on the smoking policy, I think it's a jolly good idea, because it's well known fact medically that passive smoking can cause more harm sometimes than someone that actually smokes, or equally just as dangerous. And it's quite obvious that smoking will be an illegal drug eventually. It's got to be phased out on a basis very slow, and the quicker the better that it is based as an illegal drug, the better, because of what it costs the health service. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Winkles. Councillor Nundy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and many happy returns. You don't look a day over 25. £20 million £20 million Sheerness Revival Project is good and absolutely desperately needed, and I am pleased that the Planning Committee approved that. Improved leisure facilities, improved healthcare are absolutely needed on the Isle of Sheppey to improve healthcare outcomes and people's mental health. Might not be so good for my bank balance when the crazy golf course opens though. But it does make me wonder, how effective will these services be, and how will they be able to cope with the sheer amount of housing that is being pushed onto the Isle of Sheppey at the moment? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nundy. I've got Councillor Palmer just getting in time.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I was pleased to hear that Sheppey's going to get some more improved GP facilities, but to echo what Councillor Nundy is saying, you can have as many GP surgeries and facilities as you like, but without doctors, it's not very helpful. And that's what Sheppey needs, and I'd like to know what the leader's trying to do about that to engage with the health service to ensure that GP numbers can be increased in the borough. Thank you.
Thank you. Leader, if you would like to respond.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. First of all, yes, I note the comments from Councillor Baldock talking about broadening the church. Well, that's what we wanted to do. We weren't the ones who excluded a group from a working party. I'll just say that. What's Will's position? Well, Councillor Baldock sat in meetings himself, which is conveniently forgotten about in terms of devolution. Yes, I've met with the leaders of Medway, leader of Gravesham, leader of Dartford. I've also had discussions with the leader at Ashford, and also discussions with the leader at Thanet too. So in terms of getting out there and seeing what's about, I've discussed all of those things. And in every one of the discussions we've had with the leaders groups in the county, I've emphasised the point that I have no executive powers whatsoever. And it is down to this council, all 47 members of it, to decide on what direction we should go, in my opinion. And so that's why the starting point has been the leaders, as I mentioned in my statement, and all 47 councillors. And that's the way for me that we should be going. And of course, I do speak to other leaders. And that's how I find out that Councillor Baldock's had conversations with other leaders on it. So, which again, he hasn't chosen to declare. But anyway, that's another issue. Yes, there has been a lack of clarity, and it's my government. And I'm prepared to stand here and say that, quite frankly, because that's how I feel about it. We do need robust data and evidence. And in terms of smoking, we had one view from your good self and one from Councillor Perkin, who said it is people's personal choice, and she wouldn't like to see that taken away, and nor would I, and that was never been suggested. But what we are suggesting is there's some halfway house to help everybody. Moving on, Councillor Harrison, I know what you said. Councillor Jays, it's certainly something I'll consider. Councillor Winkles, I know what you say, and Councillor Nundy, yeah, you're absolutely right. It is good to see that investment going out there. And you're right, many, many houses get built, and what do we see as infrastructure in terms of surgeries, provision for GPs? We just don't. But there's an issue in attracting GPs to this county. We've got one sitting here tonight who I'm sure will support that view. And Councillor Palmer, what am I doing in terms of doctors?
Councillor.
Thank you.
You can finish.
Oh, right, sorry. Okay. Yeah, what am I doing? I could throw the question back there and say, what are you doing? What are we all doing? Because what we all should be doing is lobbying, doing our best, trying to make sure that when applications come through for planning, that we look at, you see, it's not buildings that provide healthcare. So we can build 1,000 surgeries. My view is a little bit more simplistic, as it would be. Why don't we get developers to say, OK, we'll supply a GP, so we'll pay GP's wages for 10 years. I'm told we can't do that. I've asked that question, and they said it's not something we can do legally. So, you know, it's not that I'm devoid of any sympathy or empathy or trying to move this forward, but ultimately it will be down to the government, and it's down to the government to start pushing this agenda forward, and I'm hopeful that the government will. Thank you.
Point of information, Mr Mayor. An allegation was made, but I made that decision to exclude the Conservative group. It wasn't me. I have no power to make that decision. It was made at a informal administration waste group meeting. I thought the leader was present, maybe he wasn't, where it was agreed amongst the administration members that that decision would be made. So it certainly isn't. It's not within my power, or indeed my group's power, to make such a decision, just to clarify. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Mr Mayor, if you just indulge me one more time. Councillor Baldock, then, perhaps you'd like to explain why you stood up in the council meeting here and said that it was your conscious decision to do so.
Well, I remember from a meeting when it was mentioned in here, I actually said...
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
I'm allowed to respond to the leader, sir.
Do we have to have a backwards and forward? Surely it should come through the chair.
Yeah, quite right.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. That was going to be my next point.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The point I made at the time was that a decision had been made. I didn't claim that I'd made that decision. What I did was correct the leader who said that it was his error, that it had been done by error, and I just clarified and said, no, actually it was a administration decision to do so. It was not an error by the leader. I did not certainly make personal claim for it.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. I'm hoping that puts that to bed then. We'll move on to, where are we? We are now on to item 9, the motion on Highstead Park planning applications. A motion for a request to be made to the Secretary of State to visit Swale prior to the release of the Planning Inspector's report to provide invaluable first-hand insight into the local context of the development has been submitted. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Right, let's cut to the chase. Planning is supposed to be about communities, about finding a balance between much-needed progress and preserving what makes an area special. It's about ensuring that developments are a good fit for the local landscape and, crucially, for the people who already live there. But if you've been following the process so far, you might feel like these principles have been left somewhat in the glove compartment of democracy. Now, we all know about the intervention of the MP for Sittingbourne and Sheppey and others. Some in this chamber may have been aware of the letter and kept it to themselves, but let it slip at the last meeting of the full council. I'll give the MP and others credit for their enthusiasm, if only it were directed in a way that actually aligned with the interests of the communities affected by this proposal. Because let's be clear, the image of Highstead Park presented in that letter is, well, shall we say, a creative interpretation. To borrow from the world of estate agents, it's a bit like describing a broom cupboard as cosy yet functional. The reality is that the majority of the site is not even in his own constituency, and it's certainly not a built-up area. This isn't some dense urban sprawl, it's open field, greenery and countryside, where the only traffic jam is when a tractor meets a stubborn pheasant in the road. If the Secretary of State takes up our invitation, they'll see this for themselves. They'll see that Highstead Valley isn't some empty plot just waiting for houses to sprout up like daffodils in spring. It's a space that's part of the character of Swale, a place where residents have legitimate concerns about the strain this development would put on infrastructure that already creaks under the weight of current demand. Roads like the A2 don't need more cars, they need a therapy session. And this is exactly why we need that visit. A letter, no matter how strongly worded, cannot convey the lived realities of our area, nor will the eventual report from the planning inspector. That will capture the facts on planning legislation, but not the feelings which, as politicians, is an area we supposedly work in, as does the Secretary of State. When the Secretary of State steps onto those fields and sees the context and the scale of the land, the infrastructure challenges and the impact on the community, they'll get a much clearer picture than any piece of paper could ever provide. Plus, let's be honest, this isn't just about facts and figures, it's about trust. The actions of the MP have left many feeling that this process isn't being driven by transparency, fairness or even basic local representation. The public needs to see that the Secretary of State is willing to listen, not just to one voice, but to all voices. And speaking of voices, let's make sure that they hear the full Swale experience while they're here. We'll introduce them to a bit of local colour, maybe a lively chat with residents stuck in traffic on the 249, or a guided tour of the schools and GP surgeries that are already working miracles with limited resources. And let's not forget the ultimate selling point for this visit, the chance to meet the finest ward members, planning committee members and other local representatives that Swale has to offer. Where else would you find such a passionate, articulate and occasionally sarcastic bunch who care so deeply about the community? In all seriousness though, this visit isn't just a box-ticking exercise. It's an opportunity for the Secretary of State to show that decisions affecting people's lives aren't made in a bubble. It's a chance to demonstrate that planning is about listening, understanding and making choices that are fair, transparent and informed by local realities, not just influenced by the loudest letter. So let's take a step forward towards restoring public confidence. Invite the Secretary of State to Swale to walk the fields of Highstead Valley, to hear from the people who live here and to ensure that this decision is made with their voices in mind. I urge all members to support this motion. Together we can try to make sure that the future of Swale is decided with integrity, honesty and maybe, just maybe, a Secretary of State who leaves with a newfound appreciation for the beauty of open fields. I propose and also thank the officers for their very hard work. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. I see that you're putting an early entry in for this year's funniest start-up. You may lose out to Lord Buckethead, though. He normally does quite well. Councillor Speed, I invite you to second. Would you like to speak now or reserve your right?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I second the motion, but reserve my right. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I shall open the debate to members. Please indicate. Councillor Bonney.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I wholeheartedly support this. I'll throw both hands behind it. I do feel a little, having seen not just one but several letters written into various, either the Secretary of State for Housing or Transport, by either the applicant or one of the applicants or their advisors, as well as the MP. There does seem to be a bit of a cut and paste jobby, which makes me think, actually, do they understand it? Is it really coloured? Is it really unbiased? Well, of course, the answer is, of course, it's biased. But there is a plea in there, in one of the letters, that says that we have not given them an extension of time, and we should have given them an extension of time. And I find it a little bit surprising, because it got called in, and it seems to be, there's quite a lot of evidence that seems to be still missing which is quite concerning. But I'd love the Secretary of State to come down and see us. I'm more than willing to take her up the church tower, and I promise not to do anything rash. Thank you.
Councillor Baldock.
Very good speech, Councillor Bonney. I'm going to keep away from church towers. This is an incredibly important motion. I think it speaks on behalf of the majority of people in Swale who are concerned about what's happened. But it's not just Swale that is going to be affected. As we heard from the leader earlier in his response to my question, the application wasn't fit to be decided. The evidence required hadn't been supplied. We were not in a position to make a decision, despite officers constantly trying to get the information out of the applicants. And since the process, as Councillor Bonney has said, more evidence has turned out not to have been adequately provided. And yet the Secretary of State calls it in, because we can't determine it. Does that mean that from now on, developers don't have to bother sending stuff to councils, but skipping all that annoying public consultation malarkey, but can just go straight to the Secretary of State and ask her to call it in? Because if she permits this, then it drives a coach and horses, and it's a cliche, but it's true, a coach and horses right through the entire planning structure and system of this country. So yes, she needs to come down. She needs to have a look. She needs to understand the implications of what she's planning on. Oh, bad word, no, don't use planning. The implications of what she's done and the decision she might have to make. And maybe by seeing the impact and seeing the impact on the ground of these highfalutin decisions that are taken far away, she might understand actually people have lives, communities have feelings, communities have identities, and that is important. So I fully support this motion, and thank you for bringing it.
Anyone else, members? Councillor Lehman.
I support this motion. I'm not going to speak for long. I'm just going to thank Councillor Bowen and Councillor Speed for bringing the motion, and just to let you know that I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
Right. Without further ado, Councillor Speed, I believe you reserved your right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Highstead Park would be a blight on our community. It would pour concrete over 1,600 acres of greenfield land, over 85% of which is grades 1 to 3A. This would mean the loss of arable farmland for food production and security, contrary to both local and national policy. We simply cannot allow this to happen. Our planning committee voted unanimously against this proposal, albeit by this time the decision had been taken out of our hands by the Secretary of State. Radio 4's flagship Today programme ran a feature at the New Year on things to watch for 2025. They included Highstead Park as a litmus test for the government's policy on house building. Highstead Park is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, application currently under consideration nationally. It's therefore imperative that the Secretary of State reviews the site for herself as she's decided to take the final decision. Reading a dry inspector's report is one thing. Seeing the proposed destruction at first hand of harm to heritage assets, habitats, conservation areas and ancient woodland is completely another matter. The Labour MP for Sittingbourne and Sheppey seems to think this area is heavily industrial. Or at least that's what he told Polly Toynbee of The Guardian. The Secretary of State needs to see for herself that this is not true. The Labour MP for Sittingbourne and Cheppy wants all these 8,400 houses built, even though they're not in his own constituency. Why did he not have the courtesy to consult the MP who actually represents the area? So I urge members to support this motion to ask that the Secretary of State makes a personal visit to Highstead Park. I hope in particular that the Labour members will support the motion, given the overwhelming majority of resident opinion against this horrific development. And on that basis, I would request, Mr. Mayor, a recorded vote.
It will be a recorded vote then. While we wait for the paperwork to come up, do you want to start speaking, Councillor Bowen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the comments, councillors. I cannot disagree with anything that's been said. The only point I will make, though, and it refers to a comment that I saw earlier on social media, was about the planning inspector will make a visit anyway. Yes, they will, absolutely. But what the planning inspector can't do is refer in terms of what the feeling will be for residents, and that is crucial. Hence the motion and why they need to come. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. Right, members, as ever, the for, against or abstain as we go through, please. So, Councillor Baldock.
For.
Councillor Bonney.
For.
Councillor Booth hasn't made it as yet, has he? Nope, so... Councillor Bowen.
For.
Funnily enough. Councillor Braun.
Against.
Councillor Carnell.
For.
Councillor Kavanagh.
For.
Councillor Chapman.
For.
Councillor Cheeseman.
For.
Councillor Simon Clark.
Abstain.
Councillor Eyre.
For.
Councillor Charles Gibson.
For.
Councillor Tim Gibson.
For.
Councillor Gould.
For.
Councillor Harrison.
Against.
Councillor Hunt.
For.
Councillor Jackson.
For.
Councillor Jays.
For.
Councillor Last. Abstaining. Councillor Lehman.
For.
Councillor Peter MacDonald is not about. Councillor Marchington.
For.
Councillor Claire Martin.
For.
Councillor Miller.
Against.
Councillor Mishuk. For. Councillor Moore. Councillor Neal.
For.
Councillor No.
For.
Councillor Nundy.
For.
Councillor Chris Palmer.
For.
Councillor Richard Palmer.
For.
Councillor Perkin.
For.
Councillor Speed.
For.
Councillor Paul Stephen.
For.
Councillor Sarah Stephen.
For.
Councillor Thompson. Councillor Tucker.
For.
Councillor Watson.
For.
Councillor Worcester. Councillor Whiting. Councillor Winklis.
For.
And Councillor Wise. And myself for. That's right. No surprise, it's carried. We'll move on to agenda item 10, which is the motion for support for a more democratic devolution process for Kent. A motion to support a more democratic devolution process for Kent has been put forward. An alteration to change DLUHC, the old Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, to MCHLG, the Ministry for Communities, Housing and Local Government. I think that's about the 12th name change in the last 10 years. Due to the name change of the organisation has been put forward by the proposer and the seconder. Are we all happy to accept that change? Excellent. Councillor Lehman, I invite you to propose the motion. You have 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Mayor. Mr. Mayor. I've put this motion together as it's clear at this stage, regardless of whether we are included in the devolution priority programme, there is a very strong likelihood that Kent will have a directly elected mayor at some point in the coming years. Unfortunately, in the absence of very much clarity from the government on what this iteration of devolution will look like, there are a few significant concerns I'd like us to consider. First up, there's the centralisation of power. Putting so much power in the hands of one person risks undermining democratic accountability. It risks diminishing overall representation and public participation in governance. There's also the risk of voter alienation. Thanks to a combination of low turnout, a wide field, and the first-past-the-post voting system, the Mayor of York and North Yorkshire won his mayoral election in May 2024 with the backing of just 10.5% of the electorate in the area he now represents. On representation issues, we also have risks in rural counties, which are home to diverse communities, each with their own unique needs. A single mayoral figure may not be able to effectively consider the full breadth of these needs effectively, and given the huge deprivation level variance across the county, we may see policies that favour the men and maids of Kent over the Kentish men and maids. Alternatively, we may see policies that favour urban or more populated regions. This could happen very easily with regards to things like public transport, where the appeal of urban buses, which carry hundreds of passengers a week, will feel like better value for money than rural bus routes serving a few dozen passengers. But such a move would risk ignoring the far greater negative impacts of the lack of bus service on those residents who have no other means of getting to shops, doctors, or even simply to visit a friend in another village. Lastly, there's the fear of undermining local councils. Establishing a mayoral system could strip existing local councils of their key decision-making powers. This risks weakening their roles significantly, which isn't something we should take lightly. And as was highlighted by Councillor Baldock during the previous item, we could easily find ourselves in a situation where a mayor, when a contentious planning application comes forward, simply takes it out of the authority's hands and makes that decision for us. In summary, while the concept of a directly elected mayor is attractive to some, the potential downsides, from centralising power and alienating voters to undermining local councils and exacerbating inequalities, are serious concerns that we need to address thoughtfully, and are all concerns which can be mitigated to some degree by supporting the measures outlined in this motion. And onto the text of the motion, which is that this council notes that the current devolution process in Kent must prioritise democratic governance and accountability to ensure that decisions are made in the best interests of Kent's residents. The high cost of standing for metro mayoral elections in England, which currently includes a £5,000 deposit and a £5,000 contribution to be included in a candidate booklet, deters capable individuals from running for office, whilst some may see it as essential to discourage frivolous candidacies. Alternative mechanisms, such as requiring candidates to gather a specified number of signatures from electors, which is a widely used system in the US, could achieve this more effectively. Spending limits for mayoral elections are disproportionately high, with an allowance of approximately £150,000 for an area of the size of Kent. This would create a significant barrier to genuine democratic participation and fair competition. Until May 2023, mayoral elections in England were conducted under the supplementary vote system, which provided a fairer voting mechanism compared to first-past-the-post system now in use. And finally, on notes, a democratically elected assembly would enhance the devolution process by providing the necessary oversight and scrutiny of the mayor's decisions, ensuring the power is exercised transparently and in the best interests of Kent's residents. How much time have I got? I'll just move on to the
We'll save your
resolutions.
voice. Just get to the resolutions. And
This council resolves to 1. Call for the cost of standing for election to be lowered by reducing the deposit requirements and introducing an alternative mechanism such as requiring signatures from electors. 2. Submit a formal request in writing to the Electoral Commission to recommend the reduction of spending limits in mayoral elections to ensure fair and equitable competition among candidates. 3. Support the reintroduction of a fairer voting system, such as the supplementary vote for mayoral elections in England. 4. Support the establishment of a democratically elected assembly as part of the devolution in Kent, part of the devolution process in Kent, to provide oversight and scrutiny of the mayor's decisions, and write to the local government association to investigate whether this move could be backed and supported nationally. 5. Support the use of the additional member system or another form of mixed member proportional representation as the method by which to elect members to the above assembly. 6. Write a letter to the leader of KCC, the relevant minister in the Department of MCHLGC, and our local MPs, stating the council's position with regard to recommendations 1, 3, 4 and 5, and seeking their support for these reforms. And 7. Support the above positions during the devolution process in our interactions with Kent County Council and the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government and other relevant stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lehman. I now call on Councillor Gould to second the motion. Would you like to reserve your right to speak or speak now?
I'll second the motion, but I'll reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Lovely. Members, if you wish to speak, to indicate. Now, Councillor Whiting got there before everybody else, so I'm going to go to...
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and mine will be quite brief. I've got lots of sympathy with what's being suggested here until I got to the supplementary vote thing, and that's something that I just don't agree with. I think the first past the post system is the one that the British public best understand. And that's certainly the one that I would support. So for that reason, I won't be voting for it. Some of the other issues, we will, of course, as an authority, have an equal share with KCC, Medway and the other districts, I'm sure, through the leaders' good offices to ensure that we can get the best deal possible for Swale in whatever new arrangements are being brought forward. So I think it's more important that we ensure that the leader of the council understands what the members want from devolution than writing letters to all and sundry. We need to send Councillor Gibson to those conversations, and they've already started, and they'll start in earnest. My understanding is that we'll know on Wednesday next week what the position of the government. Well, that's the latest information I had. It was supposed to be by the end of this week, and I'm told now it's likely to be Wednesday. Let's wait and see. But if the government do decide that we are going to go down the mayoral route with unitaries, then it's Councillor Gibson that we have to weaponise to ensure that the residents of Swale get the best possible deal out of it. So with a heavy heart, I'll vote against this, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whiting. I've got Councillor Nundy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a slight difference of opinion to Councillor Whiting. I believe that we desperately need electoral reform across the country, so we'll definitely be supporting the motion for that, and I'm still disappointed about the 2011 referendum to introduce the alternative vote. As it goes, that was actually the first election I was able to vote in. Moving on to other parts of the motion, which I'm really pleased that our friends from the Green Party brought tonight. £5,000 deposit to stand, £5,000 cost be put in some bloody booklet, £150,000 spending limit. Who can actually afford that? The two big political parties who have got absolutely loads and loads of money in their coffers. This is of absolutely no benefit to the Liberal Democrats, no benefit to the Greens, no benefit to independents, and no benefit to Reform and some of the other small parties that exist within this country. They will not be able to afford to stand candidates in all of the seats. It's simply not going to happen. This motion really is needed, and referencing what our leader said earlier, it is down to all 47 of us to make sure that this motion is not only passed at this meeting, but also to make sure that it actually happens and really push for the engagement with KCC, push for the engagement with central government to make this process as fair and as equitable for everybody. This is going to be a huge upheaval to local politics, and I always reflect on the words of Dylan Thomas in times of crisis, so do not go gentle into that good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nundy. Councillor Tim Gibson. I believe you indicated? No. In which case it's the other Gibson, it's Councillor Charles Gibson.
Thank you, Mayor. That's very exciting. I was only very briefly to echo Councillor Nundy's view about the disappointment from 2011, also my first vote, and we got it wrong, and we should try harder in future. And to my concern with this motion, I agree wholeheartedly with everything about electoral reform. Could not be more sorely needed in our very broken democracy. Sadly, I have significant concerns about the proposal for an elected assembly. The purpose of this local government reorganisation is to have less layers of government. This doesn't achieve that. And from my experience of the London Assembly, I don't think it gets a great deal done. There are also, from another life, I had the great privilege of serving on the Greater Manchester Mayoral Authority as a scrutiny member, so there are other systems available to scrutinise the mayor. I can't claim we stopped Andy Burnham doing anything any more than the London Assembly stopped Sadiq Khan doing it, but we did at least ask some questions, and there are other options available. So we should consider those. So it is with a heavy heart that we will not be supporting this motion this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Councillor Baldock.
So loads of other people had their hands up. When you're finished. I was expecting to have lots more interesting comments to make. I'm surprised at some of the reasons not to vote for this. It's quite clearly something that's happening to this council, irrespective of what we may or may not want, irrespective of what the people may or may not want, and it needs to be done in as fair and as democratic way as possible. The £10,000 to even be able to stand is ridiculous. I don't know how many people read the Police and Crime Commissioner booklet that apparently goes round. I don't recall having seen it, but apparently there was one. So if you're going to pay £5,000 contribution to something that goes to every home but nobody even remembers seeing, it seems to be a little bit dubious. The whole process is littered with anti-democratic measures. We need electoral reform. We need spending limits that are reasonable. We need not to limit people from standing by financial measures. Of course, what may slap the instigators of this in the face is by having first past the post elections, we're likely to get a few reform MPs, reform mayors, especially in Kent, which they might not have done under the supplementary vote. When you try and manipulate democracy for your own ends, it always goes wrong. You shouldn't do it. You should do it on principles. You should do it because it's the right thing to do. And the right thing to do is to get a process that engages with people, that gets more than 11% turning out to vote for the last Kent-wide candidate in the Police and Crime Commissioner. This doesn't do that. This isn't interested in that. So this motion is important. We need to set a marker down. If you're going to fiddle about with local government, involve the people and make it better. Not worse, make it more democratic, not more undemocratic, and involve the people. So I will be supporting this motion even though I think we should have an assembly for Kent that has exactly the same powers as the Welsh Assembly, but I don't think I'll get support for that.
I have got Councillor Perkin, then Wise, then Palmer, and then if those can raise.
Are we okay? Thank you. Yeah, completely agree. Right, I'm going to start by prefacing this by saying that I could not be more against the idea of mayors at all. Like, if you paid me, I wouldn't be more against it. So it's absolutely correct that devolution in Kent absolutely must be prioritise democratic governance and accountability and be in the best interest of our residents. The cost of standing and the high spending limits absolutely do exclude huge amounts of people from standing who might be excellent and are completely shut out. Accessibility to layers of government at all levels needs dramatic improvement, and I'm not sure that the government have made the diversity of government a priority when looking at the devolution of local government reorganisation, and that is something that I intend to speak quite loudly about whenever I'm given the opportunity to during Devo conversations. That said, I'm not sure where you would draw the line on what would be included as a frivolous candidacy. I can think of a few that I would class as frivolous for APLE, that others probably wouldn't. And also it would deprive us of the joy of watching people like Boris Johnson have to stand up next to giant Elmos. So I'm not sure where we would look at the line for that. Still electing under first past the post is inherently undemocratic, and Councillor Nundy said the words that drive a knife through all Liberal Democrat hearts when bringing up the previous referendum, which did not go well. But it was really recently changed to first past the post for electoral mayors by the Conservative Party, and it is something the Labour Party, for unknown reasons to me, seems to want to forge on with. And we're one of the only countries in the world that still bothers with this voting system because it is so well understood as being undemocratic. I'm also quite shocked that Councillor Whiting thinks the British public are too silly to understand other ways of voting when residents across... Well, you did say that people understand it better, which is, I think, a fair I think, you know, what else does that mean? So to that understand, I think it's, you know, plenty of people across the world are able to understand single transferable voting, and we shouldn't write the British public off with that. I also agree with Councillor Gibson around the additional layer of government that creating a Kent Assembly would mean. A Kent Assembly with no mayor, absolutely 100% yes. A Kent Assembly with a mayor, unfortunately no. So I will listen to the rest of the debate, but I am minded not to vote for it, and I should have put amendments in, so apologies.
Thank you, Councillor Perkin. Councillor Wise.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with the thrust of the motion around accountability of mayoral powers. But my issue with it is the idea that mimicking the London Assembly is part of the answer to that, when there are plenty in London and many of the London boroughs who would like to see the possibility of a better system developed there. And what I would welcome is the LGA facilitating something urgently to look at what could be brought in to make sure that we do have some clear accountability of those executive powers and scrutiny of them. But the bit that I do agree with, but it's not enough for me to support this motion, is about bringing the mayoral system back to the system that was there before, as Councillor Perkins said. That was the initial system that was introduced when the mayoral system was in, and I think there was an important reason for that, because when people have an individual be gaining executive power, I think it is right to look at the voting system. But unfortunately, there's much else in that, in particular mimicking the London Assembly, that means I won't be supporting this motion.
Councillor Palmer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think most of the points have been made, but I think it's a sad reflection on democracy when things are rushed through, because I don't think this has been well thought out. And even Councillor Wise said, we don't really know, or the LGA needs to do something. And no one knows what's going on. Maybe the Greater Medway leader of the council there does, but on July the 4th, we voted in a democratic election. And since then, we finished up really in a very undemocratic world in this country. And I think what's going on and what's gone on is a sad reflection on how the government intends to run this country. There's a total lack of engagement with the people and elected members. There's a total lack of engagement on this. I don't think many people understand it. I don't think many members sometimes don't understand it. So there may be certain errors with the motion, but I will be supporting it, and I'd like to thank the Green Party for bringing it forward. And I know Councillor Whiting said about weaponising things. I think he's right. We need to weaponise this, but we need to weaponise it, all of us, and highlight some of the errors and the problems with this to all our constituents, all our residents, and as far as wide as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. I've got Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll start by saying that this motion raises important questions about democracy, electoral fairness and governance in Kent. While I appreciate the intent behind the proposals, I cannot support the motion, although I do agree with aspects of it and sit on the fence on others. Let us first acknowledge the potential benefits. Reducing financial barriers to standing for office could encourage greater participation, allowing more diverse candidates to compete. I agree a deposit of £5,000 times 2 for a mayor when an MP is £500 seems out of kilter. A deposit serves not just as a barrier to frivolous candidacies, but as a demonstration of a candidate's seriousness and ability to garner public support. While an alternative system based on collecting signatures is suggested, this could equally be burdensome or even ineffective in filtering out unserious contenders. Likewise, ensuring proper oversight of a mayor is vital, but I don't think it's maybe via an elected assembly. That isn't the best way. As a council now, and whatever the future holds, surely it would be best that the oversight of a mayor is best served by connecting to the new and currently existing council. Wouldn't we want the Swale Borough Council voice to be heard rather than an assembly? I wonder if London councils think that the assembly helps or hinders them. I don't know, but these are reasonable concerns that deserve discussion. However, the motion also presents significant challenges. The call to reduce spending limits in mayoral elections, while well-meaning, risks unintended consequences. Furthermore, the proposed spending cap of £150,000 may seem high, but when broken down across Kent's population of approximately 1.9 million, it amounts to just under 8 pence per resident. All too often we hear comments that we never hear from candidates or nothing came to me. 8p a person. Doesn't even cover printing costs, so reducing it, I think, will have a detrimental impact. Even more so as prices are going up. While fairness in elections is important, we must also ensure that candidates can adequately communicate their policies to the electorate. The motion also advocates for the reintroduction of a supplementary vote system and an elected assembly for Kent. However, the shift to first past the post was made to provide clarity and simplicity in election outcomes. Reversing the decision or adding new layers of governance would not necessarily lead to better democracy, but could instead introduce complexity, bureaucracy and additional cost to taxpayers. But I do recognise there are issues with the first past the post, so I sit on the fence on that one. And ultimately, while I recognise the concerns about fairness and participation, the proposed changes risk creating more problems than they solve. They could lead to unintended administrative burdens, increased costs and unclear governance structures that may not serve the best interests for Kent's residents. And for these reasons, sadly, I cannot support it.
Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I intend to be here, all things being equal, not here, but here, for another 50 years or more. So when in 2011 I was told, as were my residents, this is a once-in-a-lifetime vote to say, do you want to change the voting system in this country from first past the post to some sort of proportional representation? I took that once in a lifetime to mean once in a lifetime. Not, well, you know, some of these people would be dead now, so let's have another vote. So as far as I'm concerned, once in a lifetime meant that. I agreed with that one. The other once in a lifetime, on the 23rd of June 2016, I most certainly didn't agree with, but that was another once in a lifetime. Thanks.
Councillor Miller.
Whilst I agree the motion has some interesting points.
Councillor Miller.
Sorry, Mayor. Whilst I agree the motion has some interesting points, should we not be cautious passing motions on speculation? Literally none of us here know what the future process is going to look like and what system will be in place. Maybe this motion would be better suited at a later date when there is greater clarity, allowing for a more informed decision.
Thank you, Councillor. That's everyone that I had, so we'll go back to Councillor Gould, who reserved his right.
Thank you. I think this is a complicated area, and as Councillor Miller did point out, we don't have all the facts as yet. And I think what this motion is about flagging up some of the principles that we actually need to be examined. We don't know what the final proposals are in many of these areas, but I think what the motion seeks to do is to highlight the areas that actually need to be looked at, particularly around the democratic nature of the voting system. I think the first past the post is widely recognised as providing, as disenfranchising a large proportion of the electorate, and I think it probably contributes to the people feeling that actually their vote doesn't count because they're in the minority, where actually these other voting systems actually begin to make people feel, well, whatever the outcome, my vote did have an impact. So I think using elections like this to actually flag up this sort of thing is worthwhile and will hopefully increase democratic participation. Scrutiny is needed. You know, if we're giving a mayor the sort of powers that they're talking about, then some form of scrutiny is needed. And this, again, is flagging up the need for that, and ideally democratically elected assembly, which would give that level of scrutiny so that it is an untrammeled power. And I think in this motion, it's a long and detailed motion with many different parts that no one's going to agree with every single bit of it. But I would appeal people, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Actually, think about what this motion is sending that says we want democratic accountability, we want fairness and democratic involvement and scrutiny of the mayor's decisions. And I think, as a whole, this motion will send that message, and therefore I'd appeal people to vote in favour, and I would like for there to be a recorded vote.
I'll second that.
Yep. Thank you.
There'll be a recorded vote. Councillor Lehman, would you like to take the opportunity to sum up? Please do, so that we've got time to get the paperwork together.
I would, yes. I'll come back first and echo something that Councillor Perkins said in response to Councillor Whiting. Supplementary vote. The supplementary vote system is one that voters understand is a frequently used argument in support of first past the post. To be fair to Councillor Whiting, he didn't use the other part of the argument which is frequently attached to this, which is that other systems are too complicated. Despite the fact that he didn't use it, I'm going to respond to that. I find it pretty insulting to suggest that a voting system which gives electors the opportunity to put 2 X's in 2 boxes rather than 1 X in 1 box is somehow too complicated. It's verging on rude. In response to Councillor Gibson's points, mayoral strategic authority will exist either way. I don't think that having a process by which members are directly elected to that mayoral authority rather than those members being provided by the underlying unitary authorities would create an additional layer. But yeah, so much of this has been going on so quickly that I could be wrong on that. Councillor Wise also touched on opposition to the London Assembly. So to respond to this at the same time as continuing to respond to Councillor Gibson, the wording of the motion was specifically, although I mention in this council that believes that, I deliberately left any mention of the London Assembly out of the resolutions because I agree with you that the London Assembly is not a perfect model. That was just something, it's literally the only one in the country, I believe, which is directly elected in that way. One of the other things that the directly elected authority in London has is representation from all geographical areas of London. They're all directly elected from their areas, and this would be particularly useful in Kent. Further to my opening comments, we've got such diverse areas in terms of, demographics, diversity, and deprivation, and other things beginning with D, that to have members from the current districts elected, and to ensure that those areas at least have some voice in that scrutiny process and that oversight, feels to me to be an incredibly important thing. And I was very disappointed to hear that our good friends in the fight for electoral reform, the Lib Dems, suggested that this was not a good thing. But perhaps I misunderstood. And my fear is that scrutiny provided by members of the underlying authorities might reflect the Cabinet at Kent County Council, which disproportionately, although not exclusively, features councillors from Sevenoaks and wealthier rural areas. In response to Councillor Harrison, the referendum in 2011 was on the alternative... Oh, sorry. It was on the alternative vote, not proportional representation. I know people who voted against AV because they felt it wasn't true proportional representation. And I wanted to come back on frivolous candidacies, but they'll have to wait. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go to the vote now. Councillor Baldock.
Definitely for.
Councillor Bonney.
For.
Councillor Bowen.
Against.
Councillor Braun.
Against.
Councillor Carnell.
For.
Councillor Kavanagh.
Against.
Councillor Chapman. For. Councillor Cheeseman.
Against.
Councillor Simon Clark.
Against.
Councillor Eyre. For. Councillor Charles Gibson. Abstain. Councillor Tim Gibson.
Against.
Councillor Alistair Gould.
For.
Councillor Harrison.
Against.
Councillor Hunt.
Against.
Councillor Jackson.
Against.
Councillor Jays.
For.
Councillor Last.
Against.
Councillor Lehman.
For.
Councillor Marchington. Councillor Claire Martin.
For.
Councillor Miller.
Against.
Councillor Mushak. Councillor Moore.
Against.
Councillor Neal.
Against.
Councillor No.
Against.
Councillor Nundy.
For.
Councillor Chris Palmer.
For.
Councillor Richard Palmer.
For.
Councillor Perkin.
For.
Councillor Speed.
Against.
Councillor Paul Stephen.
For.
Councillor Sarah Stephen.
For.
Councillor Thompson. Councillor Tucker.
Against.
Councillor Watson.
Against.
Councillor Worcester. Councillor Whiting.
Against.
Councillor Winklis.
Against.
Councillor Wise. And myself, for. It's a tight one, ladies and gents. 18 for, 22 against, 1 abstention. So I'm afraid the motion falls. Although I'm certain, though I'm sure, rather than speaking out loud, if you want to raise your hand, please feel free. I'm sure the leaders group on devolution will take something forward and discuss it to find a solution. And I do have sympathy. It's always tricky when, let's face it, none of us really know what's coming in terms of that one. And I would also suggest, Councillor Harrison, that once in a lifetime votes, they're not always the best thing. We do have to get re-elected ourselves every 4 years. Perhaps on certain issues it would be beneficial to actually vote on them again at times. On that, I'm going to call for a 10-minute recess. So if everybody can be back at 20:45.
People wait for Mr.
Thank you, members. Please be seated. Our next agenda item is item 11, the Annual Climate and Ecological Emergency Progress Report. I invite the Chair of the Environment and Climate Change Committee, Councillor Rich Layman, to speak and propose the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be very brief because it is 10 to 9 and we're halfway through the agenda. I'm very conscious that when the climate and ecological emergency was proposed and passed by this council back in 2019, it was a very different, excuse the pun, climate back then, and we had Extinction Rebellion being very visible in the news, and climate felt like something that was very high on the agenda. Ironically, since then, COVID and many other things have pushed climate down the agenda, whilst at the same time temperatures have continued rising, and as many people in the chamber will know, 2024 was the hottest year on record, breaking the record set in 2023. And each of the last 10 years, basically each of the 10 hottest years in history have been one of the last 10 years. It's good to see in this report the good work that the council has been doing to try and combat climate change. And I'm glad that we will be reviewing the Climate and Ecological Emergency Action Plan this year to renew it and hopefully reinvigorate it and continue to move forward. And I'm happy to hear people's comments. Thank you.
I invite the Vice Chair of the Environment and Climate Change Committee, Councillor Dolly Worcester, to second the recommendations and ask whether she wishes to speak now or reserve her right. Thank you very much. Councillor Baldock, would you like to?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we are going to debate it, rather than just note it, I'll say I welcome this. It is a good report of our actions to date. What I will say going forward, and this applies to a lot of our strategies and policies, I would like to see reports indicating what we can reasonably achieve in the event that we cease to exist in 2027 or 2028. A lot of strategies are for 10, 15 years. We, as a council, will not exist then, so we need to be looking at what is realistic within the last few years of this council. I think that's something we need to address in all our future reports. Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thanks to those who wrote this report. A lot of good stuff is in here. And the main aim of the report, that's the main aim on the need of the change, was to achieve net zero this year. This isn't going to happen, and really, realistically, was it ever? Now, I'm not going to criticise that, but rather put it out that whilst it's good to aim for the stars and reach the moon, as long as we're making progress and we're doing better than what we did yesterday, last week and last year, we don't need to beat ourselves up too much about that. I think this council knew some time ago that we wouldn't hit that target, but now we have to recognise it. So let's still reach for the moon, and then maybe we can use that to the gravitational pull of the moon to reach for the stars. But again, challenges remain. Despite installing 18 EV charging points, data shows that less than 1% of parking sessions involve charging. And that raises concerns about public adoption of electric vehicles. Similarly, while emissions have fallen in some areas, transport emissions remain stubbornly high, indicating the need for further policy intervention. Waste management is another concern. Recycling contamination has led to lost recycling loads, and efforts must be redoubled to ensure proper sorting and education. Additionally, while the council's ambitious goals, funding constraints remain a significant barrier to accelerating progress, particularly maintaining and expanding environmental programmes. I'm not so convinced about the viability of the car share scheme. 41 uses on average a month and 28 miles a day doesn't suggest a great uptake. or maybe we're not publicising it enough. What is the cost of providing this service? And whilst we want to be environmentally conscientious, we also have a responsibility with taxpayers' money. And I think this needs some more looking at, and maybe the committee can do that. But I'm happy to note the report. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Perkin.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, also happy to note the report. There's a couple of things which I raised at Environment Committee that concern me slightly about the report. One is that the emergence of the local plan still does quite a lot of heavy lifting within this document, and we are as yet no further forward with that actually being adopted into policy. So, and I'm not sure that we will get there before the council is dissolved. I hope that we will, but at the moment there is a lot that relies on the passing of that local plan into policy to make a difference. I think as well within the emergency planning section, I would say that there is some kind of missed opportunities there. At the very least, we should be encouraging residents to sign up to the flood line to register for any potential floods in the future, and also that we should be looking more at the effects of extreme heat on residents in terms of kind of street tree provision and shade provision in our town centres. Other than that, very happy to note it. I think the last point that I'll make is that within the RAG rating, that our communication with businesses is still in the red, and actually the carbon offsetting really relies a lot on communication and work with business. So I hope to see the council focus on that over the next period of time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Perkin. I open to members, and I've got Councillor Winklis first, and then Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I'm totally behind this report going forward. We've definitely got climate change. Just only got to see what's happened in Los Angeles the last 2 weeks. Totally uncontrolled fires, which has never been heard of before. We had it, I believe, in for this country the year before last. We've got very extreme weather patterns this winter. So we've got to go forward with this. We've had some sort of meeting earlier on about coastal erosion. Through the sea levels rising, etc. So I don't think we've got any choice other than support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Winklis. Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a couple of quick points. Page 31 of the report, the last point says, joint bid with Arriva, our main bus company. Anyone who uses the bus knows that Arriva no longer serves Swale. That needs to be updated. Also, page 37 of the report, 36 of the report, it said about garden waste subscriptions fluctuating. Could I suggest a lot of this was because of the sewage contract being such a mess for a while, and certainly in my ward, garden waste was normally what was ignored. And there's still no talk about compost bins. I personally have 2 compost bins in my garden, therefore I don't need a garden waste bin. When I lived in Waltham Forest, there was a discounted offer for residents to buy compost bins. Could we not encourage people to do that as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Mishuk.
Well, it's nice to have my debut speech in this House chamber, and I'm obviously very happy to be here and see you all. Would it not be better to invest money into the local people instead of this green agenda? Because we are worrying about going net zero, but people are really struggling, and I think they'd much rather have their money invested back into themselves rather than trying to plant a few more trees. Because we aren't going to change anything in Swale. Our country pollutes around 1% of global emissions, so whatever we do is going to have no impact overall in the grand scheme of things. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gould.
I think I need to come back on that as a classic example of the tragedy of the commons. If that's true of 1% of if 25 countries produce 1% of the world's emissions, actually that's only 25 countries, would be a quarter of the world's emissions. So the fact that we can't do everything is not an argument for doing nothing. I mean, yeah, we had ambitious targets, and I'd first admit we're way off those targets. We always were going to be way off those targets, given how much of it depends on things outside of the Council's control. But the trouble is, the longer we leave this, the greater the change that has to happen, and the more radical the change that has to happen, or it will happen to us. I think that's the thing. We don't realise just what is coming down the line if we do not take these actions at every single opportunity that we have to take these actions, and at the council level, individual level, national and international. It all has to happen all at once if we've got a hope of getting anywhere near the sort of reduction that we need. So, yeah, don't fall for the tragedy of the commons. Thank you.
I will check, Councillor Mishek. Was it a point of personal clarification that you were indicating for, or was it that you wanted to come back? No, if it was clarification, I could have allowed it. Councillor Sarah Stephen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's just a bit of for Councillor Kavanagh. Arriva do run through Swale. The X3 goes from Maidstone to Canterbury. That's an Arriva bus. It's Stagecoach now, is it? Okay, right. I stand corrected. Nice try.
Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Some of this does actually affect the pocket of our residents, and I'm talking waste recycling. And whilst, you know, I've been a great proponent of education over many years, I don't think you need education to know that you cannot put a house brick in your recycling bin, that you cannot put a gas canister in your recycling bin. Some of these contaminations are pig ignorant, basically. Yes, some of the is education, because a lot of the stuff now in diddly little letters, you need a magnifying glass, this can be recycled. Yes, but not by Swale. So a lot of stuff is in there because it says it can be recycled, and perhaps people don't understand enough of what we do. But some of it, as I say, house bricks, that is an education. That is, I can't be bothered. I'm just going to chuck it in whatever bin's nearest. And if it happens to be the blue bin, well, bad luck. Those contaminated bins cost us money. It means we don't get the recycling credits, but it costs us to have it taken further afield. So it does affect the pockets of our residents, as do a number of these things in here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Jays.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't going to speak on this, but sorry, Mr Mayor, but I don't want the Coalition's record trashed on this from a new member to the Chamber. This does save our residents money. £10 a bike. Who can get a second-hand bike for £10? I think that's a great scheme. Installing solar panels on this building will save the residents money within just a few years. The fuel vouchers that are being handed out worth £63,000. That is saving our residents money. Water debt cleared. That's saving our residents money. I don't want people to just read climate change and then make up their own narrative. Read the report.
Councillor Cardell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I will note this report. What worries me, and for my grandchildren in the future, we've now got a president in America who's going to increase mining. We've got China doing what they like. And I think no matter what we do, in the end, it's those countries that have got to sort themselves out, or there won't be a world for our children.
Thank you, Councillor Carnell. Well, to avoid the ending on a bit of a negative, I'm actually going to throw myself into the debate for once. And I will say that I think this is a good report for noting. We did set ambitious targets. We worked damn hard to get there. No one was expecting to have to spend a small fortune on COVID, and that's why a lot of projects had to go on the back burner. And I think as the committee looks to develop the future plan, I would request that more attention is paid to the fact that we are such a coastal borough, and therefore we should be doing more on our wetlands, not just our inland carbon sequestration. And I would also suggest my disappointment from the Green School Awards from before Christmas that we did not have a single school from Swale nominated. Now, there were schools winning awards because they recycle. There were schools winning awards because they do litter picks. Every district in the county had a winner, except Swale, because we didn't have anyone put the schools forward. So do go to the schools and suggest that they put themselves forward, because there's a lot of projects going on. I've seen them all around. Ethelbert Road, which I'm sure we'll get to later, multiple times, has huge volumes of biodiversity equipment in, where they've built Christ knows how much in terms of dead wood for the insects. You've got St Mary's that has an area of wildflower and wild growth and hedgerow that they've installed. So there's a lot going on, but we need to make sure that the people in the borough know that they can get some recognition for it and they win some money towards doing more of it. So with that, I'll go back to Councillor Worcester, who reserved her right.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I wasn't going to say it, but I will do. I want to congratulate our newest councillor and say, actually, we've all been in that position where we've got to stand up for the first time and say something. So congratulations, well done. Even though I absolutely disagree with every single thing you said. But as grown-ups, we're capable of doing that, aren't we? So I'm very pleased with this report. I think officers have worked extremely hard to bring this information together. As a council, we have declared 2 emergencies, one for climate and one for housing. I have a bit of a dream that before this council rolls into something else, that all of our decisions are taken through those lenses of the 2 emergencies that we have declared. We have named those as a priority, and this is one of the documents that helps us navigate that subject, because climate and environment is one of the major bits of work that all councillors do that affects every single resident and has the capacity for all parties to work together. No matter what tie colour you wear, we've all got kids, we've all got families, we've all got homes in this borough, and we can absolutely all benefit from working together, reading reports, making sure that we take this work through to our other committee work, and making some really good decisions. I'll pick up on Councillor Baldock's point. Absolutely, I think streamlining, making sure that we're getting things done that are realistic and achievable. I'd like to see that too. On Councillor Bowen's point, I think, yes, EV cars and things have been a hot topic, but the response to things like car clubs has always been muddied with regards to the national response. When Prime Ministers change priorities and say, actually, it's a priority, then it's not, and it's a very difficult comms message for residents to pick up and run with. So I'm hoping for more clarity from government so that actually residents can feel that they can do something and all of their actions count. And also, don't forget, we absolutely have had setbacks in terms of KCC removing quite a substantial amount of our waste budget, actually just before the budget last year, and we've still come through that. We've still come through COVID. We can still do good work, even though it may not be us that benefits from it. And I think that's the attitude we've got to take into devolution, that right up until we finish, we can still make positive improvements. And I think this is one of the strongest ways that we can do it for our environmental work. Well done, officers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Worcester. Councillor Lehman, did you want to come back, or?
No, thank you.
In which case, members, all those in favour of noting the report, please raise your hands. Any against? Any abstentions? I think that is unanimous. Lovely. Let us move on to agenda item 12, which is the Housing, Historic Delivery and Local Plan Review Housing Target. On page 61, paragraph 5.1 in this report, it was correct at the time of writing in November, back before the Policy and Resources Committee, which suggested changing the local development timeline again. So it should not be considered that we're going out to consultation in October 2025 on Reg 18. That's not the current plan, but it was when the paper was written. In the same way, I think further in the report it mentions a consultation in May 2024, which again was a desire at one point but was not possible. So I will invite the chair of the Policy and Resources Committee, Councillor Tim Gibson. It's been a little while, Tim, to introduce.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And notwithstanding the amendments that the Mayor has just outlined, the purpose of the report is to ask full council to agree the proposed housing target approach as reported to the P&R Committee on the 27th of November 24. And there are two recommendations there. The full council consider the approach to setting a local plan housing target as set out in paragraphs 3, 1 and 2 of the Planning and Transportation Policy Working Group, easy for me to say, on housing, historic delivery and local plan review, housing targets, including a 5% buffer for consultation and examination resilience. And the full council considers the proposed growth within the draft plan, Reg 18 consultation of 7,990 dwellings, including a review of the remaining local bearing fruits, 1703 dwellings, as well as a balance of the housing needs, 6,287 dwellings. Delegation be given to the head of place to amend figures with the Policy and Resources Committee, Chair and Vice Chair solely in line with any additional planning permissions granted, new dwellings completed, annual changes in government published statistics, and any evidence which concludes previously granted or allocated sites that are no longer deliverable. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. I invite the Vice Chair of the Planning and Transportation Policy Working Group, Councillor Monique Bonney, to second the recommendations and ask whether she wishes to speak now or reserve her right.
I'll second for the purposes of debate and I'll reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm happy with the recommendations. However, yet again, it's another example of the impact of Highstead Valley. And that until a decision is made, we effectively have our hands and feet tied trying to run a 100-metre race. Whether we will be able to progress any part of the local plan this year, I don't know, as we don't know when the Secretary of State will make a decision. It could be this year, may not be this year. And coupled with that, with what happens if we move to unitary authority and a Kent Mayor who will have strategic planning within their role, so many what-ifs, which isn't in the interest of our residents, but leaves us still open to applications like Highstead Valley going forward. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. Councillor Perkin.
I'm going to leave it to other people, thanks.
Councillor Lehman.
I'm going to defer to Councillor Gould.
I think one of the points about this is the targets that have been set that we're noting and I suppose to some extent agreeing with are targets for housing numbers that are imposed on us by the calculation that we're required to follow. And so I think that's an important thing to be always reiterated when we're considering the local plan, that some of it actually isn't decided locally. And in fact, quite a lot of it is not decided locally. We're having to follow national planning and policy frameworks, which again have been amended to up the figures again and have not really taken account of some of the important things in our local area, such as best and most versatile agricultural land, and the AONB, or National Landscapes as it's now called. So it's a local plan, but a very constrained process, and that I think is something that's going to come up time and time again, but I think needs to be said time and time again.
Thank you, Councillor Gould. Councillor Baldock.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm a bit concerned. I don't think this is actually what was agreed at PNR when this has come forward. Now, I understand the changes that have been made due to legal changes and that, and changes that we've made to the delivery. But at PNR, it was discussed about looking at potentially challenging the numbers. Now, in 2.9, the report says, as the local plan drafting progresses through evidence development, blah, 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 there may become identified planning reasons that set out hard constraints to strategic development, but may result in a lower housing requirement for the plan period. At that point, it would then be appropriate to amend in detail the Council's local plan housing target. I think that is an essential part of what was discussed. Now, under 4, alternative options considered and rejected, this report suggests at this stage of the local plan must use the local housing need as determined and then gather evidence to see if those windows open. That shouldn't be under an alternative option considered and rejected. That is what we should be doing. And one of the recommendations at PNR was to agree funding for and additional sustainability work in advance of a Regulation 18 draft plan consultation on such things as unsustainable commuting patterns. Now, for those who haven't followed the complicated, and I won't say tedious because I find it fascinating, but I might be alone in that, way that this has gone through, there is an exceptional circumstances, I think it's attached, again, which indicates that there may be problems with actually being able to deliver the imposed targets. That may need some work as the evidence comes forward. That was what we agreed at PNR, but that is missing from this report tonight. Now, I don't think things that are agreed at PNR to go through the full council should be missed out in the report to full council. So I would ask that that is reinstated as it should have been from PNR. And if I could have a seconder for that, I'd be welcome. Thank you.
Is that an amendment without notice? I think you might want to go for a deferral then, because that's quite a chunky. So I'm not going to accept it at this moment. So it would, if you want to go for a deferral, I could empathise, but...
What do you mean?
A deferral on deciding the whole motion, but I'm not taking that one as a...
I'll propose that then.
It's a report, and we can't normally change the recommendations on the report normally. I'll consult.
Otherwise, vote against it. Point of information, Chair, which may help. Don't know if I'm actually speaking against myself now, but the recommendations that PNR actually gave PNR the power to make the decision, which they did, to support the additional work. Therefore, perhaps it didn't need to be recommended to full council. The decision to make it has already been taken and can't be rescinded.
So Councillor Baldock, what we were looking at was that the recommendations to council this evening are those verbatim that were agreed by PNR, and so I don't think actually that you're other than the fact there's a concern over that. I don't personally know why the report is different, and I'd be interested to know why the report is different, because normally it's expected to be the same. But the only thing that council is being asked to do is to agree the recommendations that PNR put forward that were exactly the same this evening as they were then. So I think it's just the context of the report that is potentially different. And as you say, there's nothing that's been denied by this report coming forward this evening, because the recommendations are the same.
I'm now going to go to the Chief Exec for some further clarification.
So PNR didn't agree additional money for modelling. What they did agree was work on unsustainable commuting patterns. So that was what PNR agreed. And PNR agreed that, and because it wasn't a recommendation to full council, they agreed that. That is something that has been agreed by PNR. So it doesn't need to be. PNR is a sub decision-making body of full council, so that doesn't need to come here.
It's right, I'm sure we'll be revisiting this again in a few months' time anyway, with yet more numbers changing. Who did I have next? I have Councillor Whiting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mine's only a quick question, really, because under recommendation 2, the suggestion that any changes that come through with planning permission granted and whatever else are just agreed by the head of planning and the chairman and the vice chairman of PNR. I've got no great objection to that, but I think there were some big ones coming down. We know that there's a 650 on Sheppey coming through. We know that the stuff at Queenbourne Halfway is being reduced from 1,000 to about 500. There's a whole load of things that actually I think should really go back to the Planning and Transportation Working Group for them to discuss. And it doesn't say in here that will happen. It says in here that simply the figures will be updated, the plan will be updated at the stroke of a pen by the leader, his deputy, and the head of planning. And so unless I've read it wrong, it would be nice to get that confidence that those sort of changes, and I'm talking, when we're talking, even 100 houses can throw figures out. So 100 houses we weren't expecting. I do think things ought to be going back to the Planning and Transportation Working Group for them to consider, and then just so that they can give PR a heads up on what they think the outcome of that should be. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Whiting. Now that sounds like a sensible amendment. Shock horror. I'm taking advice.
Can Councillor Baldock second it, Mr. Mayor?
Which I do believe you've just seconded, which is for it. So I'm taking that as you would like it to go back to the Planning and Transportation Working Group, which no doubt would discuss it anyway before the leader and deputy leader spoke with the whatever the title is now, head of place. I lose track. Head of property, economy and planning and everything. Joe, just make it easy. It'll go to transport, and if everyone's happy for that to just go into the recommendation. Oh, apparently I have to take a vote. All in favour? That's unanimous. No, it's not. No, it's not. Any against? Councillor Harrison, just to ruin my unanimity. Any abstentions? There's lemon cake too. So that's carried on there. So Councillor Charles Gibson was next on my list.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very briefly, just to say, we of course should note these numbers and get on with it. I apologise to those who have the misfortune of listening to me on PTPWG and PNR repeatedly saying I think we should get on with the local plan and that we have delayed this too many times. But I do think we should do that, and we have delayed it too many times. My usual caveat that we have this lovely report saying we don't have any exceptional circumstances and we have to follow the number which we were told by our officers before we commissioned it and spent any money on it, and several members repeated that plea. So we should avoid wasting money on such things in future. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Anybody else? We've got Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's quite an awkward one, this, because if you speak to anyone, we can't reach the targets already. And now we're going to increase them. And we're going to lay back and say, let's go and do it and spend loads of money out and do all this. And we know what the inevitable result is. You're not going to get a local plan through. Maybe we should defer this to 2027 and let the Greater Medway Authority take it over. However, I do feel that in the leader's questions, he mentioned about GP services and what do you do about it. Well, I raise it quite often at planning, whether it's in Tenham, whether it's on the Sheppey, whether it's in Faversham. There are serious problems. Traffic, highways, education. We should be making them known all the time. We are often putting in developments which are unsustainable. And sometimes they say, here's some affordable housing which isn't affordable locally. Or there's some social housing and then they worm their way out of it. So I think we need to take a stand, because what we're not building houses for local people. We're not building houses for children and grandchildren who live here. We're building houses for people to come and move down here because they see it as a cheaper option than living in the boroughs of London, in the suburbs. So I think really, I look at this, but I think we're going too far with a local plan. I think we need to be saying, we can't achieve these numbers, government. What are you going to do about it? And I think there are exceptional circumstances here. You only have to look at what's going on. And we need to probably put this on the back burner and say, no, I can't support this, thank you.
Anybody else? Councillor Bonny, you reserved your right.
Thank you very much. We find ourselves in a rather hideous position with these imposed targets. And what I find even more hideous is the fact that quite a large contributing factor here is a site that is owned by government. And that is Queenborough and Rushenden. And 20 odd years ago, I think we were promised some redevelopment, and they've done the commercial bit, but we were promised that they would look at, I think it was 2,100, and what have we got? 95. They spent £30 odd million building it up 2.5 metres for it to be flood resistant. And then approximately 6 months ago, they came to us, the working group, and said, do you know what? We haven't got the money for this, and we haven't got the stomach for this, and we're not going to be master planners anymore. We're going to chuck it out to the market. And actually what's resulted and what's coming down the line in the next few weeks is they're going to tell us that they can only deliver half of what they said they were going to do. And that planning inspector on that Ufton Court one decided that, quite frankly, the government's own site couldn't be delivered within the 5-year time frame and ripped it out of our 5-year supply. And what that means, that result is that greenfield developments, all those developments that your communities are up in arms about, including Highstead Park and other things, get pushed through because the government-owned site cannot be delivered, because for 20 years it's sat intransigent, regardless of what swell officers, etc., and the steering group have tried to do to move it along. And it is within the gift of government to sort this out. But what will solve it is money. And it's money it doesn't want to cough up, but instead it wants to shove the housing target on our area so that we end up with even more unsustainable development. And that is hideous. That is a hideous fact that we are now faced with, that we are now scrabbling around looking for more sites because government says we've got to find them. And we cannot compel the developers to develop the 7,000 units that have already got planning permission, plus the 1,700 that are allocated but as yet come forward because of land banking. So, that hideous position, this whole thing is some kind of hideous farce from a nightmare. And tonight we were told, another 300 properties are going to fall into the sea if the worst case scenario happens. On the other hand, we've got climate change and all the other things that are going on. What exactly are we supposed to do? And I would like to correct something earlier that was said about GP services, because the NHS came back and they said, we've got enough property. We don't want any more property from developers. Yeah? And there we are with the worst GP ratio in the country. And actually, if you look over the last 10 years, this borough has increased its housing stocks far more substantially than the rest of Kent. And what we haven't got is the corresponding health and education infrastructure. And what I do not see is a plan for that. And yet we are expected to find more housing stock. And that more housing stock isn't affordable. It's not what our youngsters are looking for. This does not meet the criteria of our local needs. And for that reason, I find this all pretty galling.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gibson, would you like to sum up and take us forward?
I would like to, but I think Councillor Bonney has done it quite adequately. Thank you.
Can I call for a recorded vote, please?
Have you got 5? I'd like to be different and start from the bottom. Just because it's our third one and I like to throw things around a bit, we're going to start at the bottom. So Councillor Wise, for or against?
4.
Councillor Winklis?
4.
Councillor Whiting?
Can I just on a point of order just ask what we're voting on? Because what the recommendation is that we consider this. So are we just voting to accept that we consider it? Or are we voting
for the local
to adopt
plan,
it?
yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what we're voting on. Consider that approach for the local plan.
So I'm happy to consider it. Yes.
Councillor Worcester. Councillor Watson.
4.
Councillor Tucker.
4.
Councillor Thompson. Councillor Stephen, Sarah. Councillor Paul Stephen.
Against.
Councillor Speed.
Against.
Councillor Perkin.
4.
Councillor Richard Palmer.
I consider it unfit for purpose. Against.
Councillor Chris Palmer.
Against.
Councillor Nundy.
Against.
Councillor No.
Sorry, against.
Councillor Neal. Councillor Moore. Councillor Mushak.
Against.
Councillor Miller.
4.
Councillor Claire Martin. Councillor Marchington. Councillor MacDonald is not here. Councillor Lehman.
I'm really sorry, but having spent most of the last 11 and a half hours in meetings, I do now feel like I've gone into the twilight zone. I have considered it, therefore I'm 4. Thank you.
Councillor Last. Councillor Jays.
Against.
Councillor Jackson.
4.
Councillor Hunt.
Considered.
I'll take that as a 4. Councillor Harrison. Councillor Gould.
Abstain.
Councillor Tim Gibson.
4.
Councillor Charles Gibson.
4.
Councillor Eyre. Councillor Simon Clark.
4.
Councillor Cheeseman.
4.
Councillor Chapman. Councillor Kavanagh.
4.
Councillor Carnell.
Against.
Councillor Braun.
4.
Councillor Bowen.
After consideration, 4.
Councillor Bonney.
I'll consider it. Against.
Councillor Baldock.
There's obviously more to this than meets the eye, so against.
Having seen such a report so many times at this point, surprise, surprise, I've considered it quite immensely. And I would suggest that I will continue to consider it, so I will be 4. There we go. And bearing in mind that we have to legally use their calculation anyway. That is duly considered with 23 for considering, 16 against considering and 2 abstentions.
Point of order. Now that we have considered it considered, does that actually instruct? Have we actually instructed anyone?
If you check the report, you'll find in there the financial members. Don't make me reach for it. You'll note in the bit at the back of the report that tells you things that we've got to consider on that. Your £100,000 budget for the additional work on commuting things. So that is what's happening, basically. But until it comes up with something that says that we can't match the figures, that can be defended, we have to go with the figures. That's all it's saying for now. It's considered. Shall we go to the review of polling districts, item 14, please? Thank you very much. I invite the leader to speak and propose the recommendations, please.
Polling districts and places. Yeah, boundary reviews next.
I do apologise, members. I've missed item 13 because it's bottom of the page. So it is local government boundary review. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you. I thought I was losing my mind for a minute.
Councillor, you're not proposing this, Councillor Baldock.
Is it?
You're not proposing this.
Yeah, so this one's actually in Councillor Baldock's hands, yeah.
Councillor Baldock, do you want to propose it?
Thank you. Just like to thank the officers, especially Janet, for her work on this. She's done a load of work for a boundary review for the council that will probably never take place. So we just discussed a local plan that will probably never get done, and now we're going to have a boundary review for a council that may never exist. But we have argued and we have made great arguments and made the case for increasing the number that we feel would be appropriate in Swale to 55. That's based on the response of members and the work that we do and everything else that's in this report, which sadly will probably never come to fruition. But I move.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock. Councillor Gibson. Are you seconding?
I'll second it and reserve my right, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you again, Mr Mayor. The report presents both potential advantages and disadvantages, and it's important that we carefully weigh these before making the decision. On the positive side, the proposed increase in council size from 47 to 55 aims to enhance democratic representation and better distribute the increased workload of councillors. The transition to a committee system in 2022 resulted in a high number of councillors participating in decision-making, which strengthens transparency and accountability. Not the first time I said that tonight. Additionally, Swale's growing population and complex socio-economic landscape, that's a good word, with areas of both affluence and deep deprivation, demand a council that can effectively engage with communities and provide necessary support. The report also highlights that councils' workloads have increased significantly. On average, members are dedicating 25 hours a week to council-related activities, and the demand for casework and community engagement has surged, partly due to social media expectations. More councillors could help alleviate this pressure and ensure that residents receive the attention and service they deserve. However, we must also consider the challenges and potential drawbacks of this proposal. Increasing the number of councillors comes with financial implications, as each additional member adds to administrative and allowance costs at a time when local government budgets are more than stretched. We must ask whether this is the most efficient use of resources. Furthermore, while the committee system allows for broader participation in decision-making, it can also lead to longer processes and potential inefficiencies compared to the previous cabinet model. The balance between inclusivity and streamlined governance must be carefully managed. Lastly, while an increase in councillors may help distribute workload, it does not necessarily address the underlying structural issues causing workload surges, such as casework inefficiencies, digital engagement demands, and support for councillors. Alternative solutions like improved technological tools, increased officer support, or process streamlining should also be explored alongside council expansion. In conclusion, this proposal brings real benefits and representation and workload management, but also presents cost and efficiency concerns. As we move forward, we must ensure that any changes truly serve the needs of residents while maintaining fiscal responsibility and effective governance. And with all that in mind, is an increase to 55 members the most responsible thing for our residents or us as members? This is for each of us to decide as individuals. And I can add that I've given my group free rein tonight. And as for me, I'm not convinced 55 is needed, rather than what we currently have, but I'm interested in the debate. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. Councillor Perkin.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I am fully on board with the idea of increasing the size of the council. That might never happen. But for a number of reasons, really. I think that there has been some good cross-party input into the report. I think there has been a lot of really good responses from members around their workload. And also, I think Councillor Bowen raised a really important point around the casework and the expectation of residents has changed. So when I was first elected in 2019, a lot of my casework was really around kind of residents, like boundary issues, or hadn't been collected, although that has been a lot of my casework this year. But it was quite small, it was quite easy to solve, and it was quite you could ask an officer, an officer would be able to deal with it quite quickly. Now, a lot of my casework is, I can't afford to feed my children. I am going to get kicked out of my house. My house is full of mould. What do I do? I've got a terrible issue with my housing provider. And it's a lot more complicated, and people are really kind of at the end of their ropes. And if I'm honest with you, the first port of call is not to go to your local councillor, is it? These people have been through multiple agencies before they even speak to us. So I'm finding it much more difficult to be able to help those people in an efficient manner because of the time pressures that I have on myself as a working person. I think also there's a real conversation to be had around the accessibility of local government to people who work full-time, have caring responsibilities, need to do things to be able to put food on the table whilst also representing the people that elect them. And that is really well defined within the equality and diversity section of the report, where it says that there are no direct impacts identified. However, one of the key aims of the boundary review is to ensure that there is equality for electors in their democratic representation. And I think that is really, really important. We need people with all kinds of different life experiences to be able to speak in the chamber, and everything that we can do to make that more accessible for people and to give people the platform that they need to be able to represent their residents effectively is for the good. So fully supportive of it. Again, very sad that it will probably be a moot point and that we will see lots of democracy being moved away from residents rather than what we're trying to achieve here, which is bring it closer to the residents. So with sadness, I support it, knowing that it'll never happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perkin. Councillor Lehman. Or would you like Councillor either or?
Apologies. I was expecting to have to put my hand up and speak during the debate, so I've not fully prepared what I was going to say. I just wanted to come back on Councillor Bowen's concerns around the cost of 8 additional councillors. By my calculations, I mean, it's not an insignificant sum, but 8 additional councillors would cost the council in the region of £48,000, which is the equivalent of 0.17% of the council's budget, revenue budget. But the value for money that those additional 8 councillors would bring is enormous. And then ironically, you went on shortly after that to suggest that another option would be increased officer support. Is that an additional hire, which would be one person taking that wage of 8 councillors, or is that just a greater workload on the officers that we already employ? So I think, you know, it's great that we've moved to the committee system, but if I'm honest, a lot of us are very, very stretched, and it means that we have a system where this role is less accessible to those with full-time jobs or even part-time jobs, less accessible to those on low incomes or who don't have a partner with a reasonable income, and just less accessible to anyone of working age and anyone from a more diverse background. So decreasing the workload very slightly will increase the chance of those people being able to choose to stand. On top of that, we have a problem well acknowledged where our committee system, whilst great on paper, is failing in some areas. We have councillors turning up to meetings who have not read their papers, and having fewer if we have a greater number of councillors, we can spread that workload a little bit more and hopefully have better engagement, better scrutiny of decisions, and better governance all round. I'll leave it at that because that's all I've prepared so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lehman. I now open the debate to members. Oh, yeah. Councillor Speed, if you want to start us off.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Given recent announcements, I'm wondering whether anybody's actually asked the Borough, the Boundary Commission, whether or why this review is still taking place. It's expressed as an opportunity to examine how we wish to organise and run the council for the next 15 to 20 years. Well, as we know, we're going to cease to exist in 3, so what is the point? It's stated that this proposal of 55 councillors will more evenly spread the workload of councillors. I'm not sure I agree with that. I think the mathematical calculation is flawed. It's based on the average time spent being a councillor at 14 hours a week, which is 2 hours more than a review 2 years earlier. So you therefore need 8 councillors to mop up that extra 2 hours. Well, firstly, I don't know where 14 hours a week comes from. Feels like 14 hours a day at the moment. And my workload is not determined by how many other councillors there are or how many residents live in my ward. It's determined by issues, whether that's the waste contract fiasco or, dare I say it, dealing with a massive planning application in my ward. An extra 8 councillors won't reduce my workload. It will increase the council's costs, and I disagree with Councillor Lehman that we shouldn't worry about spending an extra 50,000. I recall from last year's budget debate, we were arguing over sums considerably smaller than that. I don't think £50,000 is a small amount of money. It will increase officer time because there'll be more councillors for them to respond to. But fundamentally, what's the point of going through an organisation review like this when we're about to become extinct? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Speed. Before I come to you, Councillor Winklis, I believe the Chief Exec may be able to answer some of what was just raised there, so I'll let her answer that first.
Thank you, Councillor Speed. We did write to the Local Government Boundary Commission. We did ask whether we should continue with this. The Local Government Boundary Commission responded to us to say they were in conversation with MHCLG and central government around that, there had not been any decisions made around whether things should be stopped, and until those conversations have been concluded, we should continue. So that's what we've done. But we did ask the question, and we did receive the response that we should continue, hence why we're here. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Winkles.
Thank you, Madam Mr. Mayor, I should say. So I usually come. I usually make some.
I left the dress at home tonight, Tony.
Yeah. Right. I know this administration is likely to be coming to an end in 2 or 3 or 2 years, and possibly might get a year's extension, which means we'll no longer must be sitting here in this present form. But I know I've mentioned this quite a few times, representing Milton Regis on various things. I think it depends demographically what ward a councillor is representing. Some wards, in case of Milton Regis, and the new council will no doubt pick up on this sooner or later if he gets his casework coming through, we have some quite complex casework to deal with. Actually, I was dealing with one today. I've dealt with 3 since Christmas. Quite technical stuff. It does take a lot of my time, which I don't mind doing. Fortunately, I'm retired. I have the time to do it. So I honestly think that there is an argument for basically having more councillors. And my colleague next door may not, allow me to refer to Chalkwell Ward. I'm on member ward. Possibly your workload might be heavy. So I think there are grounds for looking at extending the amount of councillors we've got. In my view, if we do exist, which we probably won't. Thank you.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just a comment about how obviously having more councillors would increase sort of the type of people and people with families or who have who are carers and things. You haven't got the time to become a councillor. I care full time for my son, my mum. I work. I have a husband who works. I fit it around because I want to do what's best for the community. I'm not on a high wage. So, if we get to know everyone, we have already got this diverse culture on the council. Thank you.
Thank you. No one else, members? Lovely. I'm going to throw my 2p in again. I know I'm taking liberties tonight. Ooh,
Point of order,
Worcester
Chair.
first.
Would you like to suspend standing orders?
Seconder? Yeah, agreed. Happy days. Carry on. Councillor Worcester.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I wanted to really say something really quickly about this because the report actually highlights some of the ways that we don't need budget to do really good work on this council. And I just wanted to take the time to highlight, just this week we've had some really good work from, for instance, 2 councillors that sit down the eastern end of the island. They've restarted their parish work in Laysdown this week. That's an amazing feat. I know that area well. They've done some great work there. The new councillor from Merston has recently reached out to her ward PC. That's brilliant work. And actually, that is the sort of work. I'll do another one. Councillor Whiting. I've only had this week, one of my residents wanted to thank you for your excellent application of council grant. KCC, yes, but that's the sort of stuff that I think really needs highlighting for members. It's the stuff that happens between meetings. So I'm a bit in favour of more councillors, but I'm in favour of more councillors that add more bang for the buck of residents, doing the work in between meetings, not just coming to meetings, not reading papers, thinking that actually just sticking your hand up is the work of a councillor. It's such a freeing role. You can put so much into it if you want to, and you can really represent your area if you decide to do that. And I, for one, would like to open that up to more people if I can. I do take the point about the money, but I know from blowing my own trumpet, I put in far more work than it cost this council to have me on this council. So I think other people can have that opportunity as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whiting.
It's only a quick one, and it's not. I mean, it's not directly. It is directly related in a sense, and I think it's a conversation we need to have, particularly as we move towards if whatever devolution deals coming down the track. So I think that the role of parish and town councils as an entity, as a voice for their residents within a much larger authority that we're likely to end up with, a unitary authority. I think the grassroots voice of the people will be from parish and town councils, apologies. I'm not sure that we've got a full slate of those across Swale. No. And I do think that we need to move towards ensuring that all residents have a town or parish council representing them, because in the future, if there are only 5 or 6 councillors from Swale sitting on a much bigger authority somewhere in Medway or Maidstone, those town and parish councils will be a lifeline for those residents seeking help. So I do think perhaps in the future, Mr Mayor, we might want to consider another governance review to move that forward. But thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whiting. Before I throw back, I'll go back to where I was and make the point. Money has been mentioned. Now, realistically, having an extra 8 councillors, yes, it's 48,000 the day they introduce 8 extra councillors that aren't going to exist. It's a moot point. In that point, it's a moot point. It's a cow's opinion, frankly. But more importantly than that, when you get the next independent review of allowances, those extra hours are going to be taken into account anyway, and the chances are you get that 48k put on over the existing 47 councillors. You also end up with the same expense of the officer time. It is getting more complex. Certainly my caseload has more than tripled over the last 5 years, and part of that is down to the fact that the ward has expanded as much as it has. And it's not the little... Yes, all right, bins has been an issue separate, but it's not sort of like the old dog waste that took you 10 minutes to deal with. It's 2-3 hours an item of casework now, and that's the complex thing. And sometimes you need an hour to recover from it, because they are getting nasty. So that's a point that I think needs to be put down on the record. And as I say, I don't think we'll end up with the 55 anyway, because I don't think we'll be electing it, but... ho-hum. Right, we'll move back to our proposer to sum up. Councillor Councillor Gibson, you reserved, didn't you?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think everything that needs to be said has been said. I'm totally in favour of another 8 councillors, at least, as long as they're all in my ward, to be honest. Because quite frankly, I think we're all earning about minus 50 pence an hour, pro rata. So it does help to spread the load, and it will help to increase diversity. And that's what we should be doing. It's all right for retired old beasts like me that, well, I don't quite have so much time, because if I could sell my family, that'd be fine, and I would have lots of free time. Yeah, just to sum up, I'm absolutely in favour of this, and I think the recommendation's sound. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to make the point that we have the lowest ratio of electors to elected members of any country in Europe. So anything that...
Sorry, Councillor Baldock, do you want to... Sorry, Councillor Baldock, just to give you the chance, do you want to put that the other way round?
I wasn't sure if I'd got that the right way around. But the lowest ratio of elected members to residents anywhere in Europe. And that is not good. That is, a representational deficit. Of course, if you get more councillors, you have less residents. Your workload does go down, because some of those residents are approaching the new councillor. So I do think that, and as the Mayor said, that will be reflected in the first review that the non-existent council doesn't have. But that's what they would be taking into account. So we probably all give up 1,000, and that would find the money for the new people. So I think this is a really good report. I think it really illustrates the work that our councillors across the board do on Swale. I think we ought to be considering it as part of our submission to the next Boundary Commission when they work out how many councillors we're going to get in the unitary. I think that work is really good. It's a really solid representation of what we've done. So I fully support it.
Wonderful stuff, members. So we'll go to the vote. Those in favour, please show your hands clearly. Those against? Any abstentions? 2 abstentions. That is carried, members. Now we can go to item 14, the review of polling districts and places. Councillor Gibson T.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The recommendations are that the Council notes the consultation responses to the polling district and place review as set out in Appendix 1, and that subject to the outcome of the boundary review, just taking my tongue back out my cheek, recommendations proposed changes to polling districts and places to be considered by Council at a future date. Quite as simple as that.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. I will now invite the Deputy Leader to second the recommendations and ask whether you want to speak now or reserve, or...
I second the recommendations. Thank you.
Are you reserving? No. Excellent. Members, anyone want to... Councillor Winklis?
Thank you. Just quickly, I think we do need a review where the polling stations are positioned. I'm going to refer to my own ward. The one down at Green Porch Church Hall is basically right down the northern end of the ward, whereby the previous polling station was in the centre of the ward. We are going to look into research the voting patterns at the by-election. But anyway, leaving that aside, it was quite easy. It's far easier for people to go to the Green Porch one than on a cold winter's day from Milton South. But so the thing is, I think we need polling stations more central to a ward instead of being slanted right down one end. Thank you.
Did I see a hand go up elsewhere? Excellent. Did you want to sum up that debate, or...?
Consider it done, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
All those in favour of the recommendations? And thank you to all the parents of Ethelbert Road School for sending everything in. Any against? Any abstentions? That was unanimous. Thank you very much, members. We can go to item 15. An uncontentious item if ever I saw one. The political balance and allocation of committee seats is the next item on the agenda. Can members confirm they have received the to follow paper with the committee memberships on and whatnot?
Point of order, Mr Chairman.
Mr Mayor, yeah.
Mr Mayor, the to follow order paper isn't correct. Well, if it's this one. There has been an agreement that the rounding up was inaccurate, and that the Swale Independents will now be receiving an extra seat on licensing.
I'll invite Councillor Gibson to it.
With due respect, Mr Mayor, I haven't had a to follow paper. I've got the paper I picked up last Wednesday night, so if, nobody's emailed or offered one, thank you.
Mr Mayor, I'm looking on the website because I'm using my iPad. Could we just have confirmation if that's the correct one? Sorry. They're all wrong. So it's only the paper one that's physically present is correct. Is that right?
But this is closer to being correct.
Robin, would you like to respond on this one? Just to give us a chance. I asked you very nicely not to make me reach for it, and you made me reach for it. Consider yourselves told off.
So, just to
be clear, Councillor Baldock's correct. It was identified after the document had been published that there was a rounding error and that the SIA would due one seat from Labour. That's been obviously negotiated between them, and Councillor Baldock has obviously demonstrated he's content. So with that exception, the report is certainly correct. It's just the literally one number on the paper to follow that is incorrect, and that potentially we can allow the leader to actually introduce the report at this point.
I'm more than happy for the leader to introduce the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quite simply, the report is what it is, with the amendments that Councillor Baldock quite rightly has highlighted, and it's a follow paper. I'll say no more and sit down. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock, would you like to second the amended
I shall
paper?
second and reserve my right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Anything? Councillor Perkin? Councillor Lehman? Excellent. Anybody else want to speak on it? Wonderful. Would you like to sum up that debate? Or to use
Excellent.
Right? Lovely. Shall we go to the vote on this? Thank you very much. All those in favour of accepting the amended... Those against? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. That has passed unanimously. We can move on. Agenda item 16 is recommendations for approval. These are to note the resolutions of the Environment and Climate Change Committee. Noted. Excellent. And if anybody... I believe that takes us to the end of our wonderful meeting. So, members, if you wish... Councillor Bonney?
Sorry, yeah, just one thing. I think Carrie's online. She said there was a problem with something written in the minutes. I think they got a name spelt wrong. Yeah.
We'll get the spelling adjusted. I'm aware of how difficult that can be for some individuals at times. Normally it's a stray S. Right, so members, if you wish to, the parlour, there will be cake, there will be some beverages. You're welcome to join. Otherwise, enjoy your journey home, and I'll see you all next time for Budget Part 1. February the 19th.